Cultfiggatv, revolutionary salute, revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution, and we got a World War III alert. But first, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button, like, share, subscribe. Let everybody know Cult Figure is live. Oh, we got to get into this very important geopolitical information because that's what matters right now. The U.S. presidential election is a distraction. Oh, Kamala, Trump, that's a distraction right now. The war that is taking place in Russia and on the battlefield of Ukraine is very important. And Iran, China stepping up to back Iran is very problematic for the West. But I've been telling y'all this was going to happen. But let's first of all salute, shalom, brother. Let's take a look at exactly what's happening on the battlefield of Kursk, where the Ukrainians have made the huge mistake of invading Russia. Hotel family, salute. See, Russia, you can check in, but you can't check out.
The Russian armed forces took initiative control at the Kursk site, taking the overwhelmed Ukrainian and NATO troops, a large number of which were captured, increasingly becoming prisoners of war. In 48 hours on August 13 to 14, 2024, Russian military correspondents documented several enemy groups becoming Russian captures on
the news. They got high propaganda going on right now. I just seen a news station telling me Ukraine was still moving deep into Russia. That is a bold-faced lie. But they're steady spreading it. I'm like, what are y'all gonna do when the truth come out? What are y'all gonna tell y'all? But they're gonna be on. I'm telling you right now, they're gonna pivot right to Israel. Soon as Iran start attacking Israel, you're not even gonna hear about this no more. That's why they're building up those lies about what's happening in Russia, because they know they're not gonna have to explain themselves, because they're gonna be talking about Israel and the United States at war
on the border. But here some infographic images are not shown.
Putin could have started nuking everybody today. They captured NATO soldiers on Russian territory, bro. I don't understand the Russian playbook. I really don't know. Putin, a patient man. You know, y'all should all send him a Christmas gift this Christmas, because he thanks to him, we're going to have a Christmas, because we could be in nuclear war right now. NATO troops captured. The U.S. media not showing these people that's captured. A lot of them not Ukrainian, a lot of Polish, you know, a lot of people from Georgia, not U.S. Georgia in Eastern Europe, some British, some French, some American. All those people have been captured, man.
Although some on the Russian side were also taken hostage and killed. This senseless operation, culminating in an ambush of Kiev troops by infantry, drones, or aircraft. They opened a new direction. Where Russian troops had a greater advantage was a boon for Russian troops, despite the temporary victory of Ukrainian media. It always starts like this in all battles, even if Western mercenaries fight side by side with Ukrainians against Russia. Footage of Ukrainian troops serving in the 80th Air Assault Brigade, captured near the village of Ulanok by the 382nd Battalion of the 810th Brigade, or rather one of the battalions.
I know these people happy to get captured. They were sent there on a crash dummy suicide mission. They happy to go get captured. Now they're going to eat. Now they don't got to fight no more. They waiting on and a lot of these Ukrainians that get captured, they refuse to be swapped to go back to Ukraine. A lot of them saying, hell no, do not swap me back. I do not want to go back, man. Just throw me in prison or whatever you're going to do. I don't want to go back to Ukraine. The United States media, they're not talking about that neither.
Battalions consisting of mobilized Russian fighters. In addition to an assault team of 5 Ukrainian soldiers who were captured, Russian soldiers also seized important equipment and a ridge in the area. One of the leaders is a suspect in a criminal case, initiated by the investigative committee regarding the attack on Russian territory. According to the detainees, Zelensky sacrificed some of the most capable and experienced Ukrainian troops for the Kursk campaign. A new wave of Ukrainian prisoners and liquidation operations and destruction continue under the leadership of the Russian Special Forces and the Chechen Akhmet troops on the border. Another Ukrainian detachment that was captured stated that they had been in the region for only a day, capturing them very quickly in the first days of the operation. They were lucky not to meet Wagner fighters, because the musicians had warned that they did not plan to take prisoners. A group of the detainees added about their desire to fight the Kiev regime, because throwing these people into the fire like them were worthless.
The people say, the people begging Russia to give them a weapon. They say, man, just give me a weapon, man. We'll go back and capture Zelensky. Russia like, nah, sit down somewhere, man. We got something. Y'all say anything.
According to reports for August 13th, only in 24 hours in Kursk, the Russian armed forces have eliminated up to 420 Ukrainian personnel in NATO operations. According to the latest reports from the battlefield in Kursk, 120 French soldiers, 180 Polish soldiers, and dozens of British, Estonian, and other foreign soldiers from NATO.
Come on, man. This NATO mountain. Look, this is U.S. soldier. This man is a U.S. soldier right here, man. Look, this is a U.S. soldier. That's his U.S. flag in the middle. You see, these people playing a dangerous game with our lives right now. Really, they daring Putin to use nuclear weapons because they got their bunkers built. They want depopulation. They want Putin to wipe half the damn globe out. They can go to another part of this world you don't know nothing about. This is, we don't get conspiratorial, but this is NATO who's dying and being captured in Russia right now.
Countries have been identified. It seems that the entire operation was prepared abroad. It was a NATO operation from the start, analysts note.
All NATO gonna say is, all the U.S. gonna say is, nah, they're not NATO soldiers. All those people, they retired from NATO, and then they joined the foreign legions, and they joined these militaries in Ukraine. You think Putin believe that nonsense, man? That's called sheep dipped. That's when they take a soldier and you dip them into one of these other international legions, but they still NATO. you can't lead the French and then go fight in Ukraine and say you're not the French. You can't lead the British military, the Dutch, the Portuguese, wind up in Ukraine and think Putin is stupid. Revolutionary salute to our brother Dallas for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, family. Salute to you. But definitely helping us. Appreciate that love, family. Appreciate you being in the building. But we really gotta be thankful that Putin is a patient man, and the Most High is working with him, and he's fighting evil, and he don't want to kill all the innocent people. Remember, Putin already warned these people that he would attack government centers, military bases. Now, if they hide themselves in civilian areas, that's a war crime. That's serious business. You go to some of these U.S. military bases, they're not supposed to be nowhere near civilian areas, bro. That's a war crime, man. Don't be hiding amongst us, but it's very dangerous times right now. So that's why we got to deal with this geopolitical information, because Kamala and Trump, that's all a distraction right now. Long family, salute.
A few minutes ago, the commander of Spetsnaz Akhmet, General Abdi Alatanov, made another official statement regarding the situation in the Kursk region. In particular, he said that at the Russian armed forces' disposal was a series of documents that described in detail the plan of the Ukrainian High Military Command to invade the Kursk region.
Remember,
according to General Abdi,
Putin know who we are. He know you're not supposed to kill the people of the Most High. Remember, Putin released all of the pictures of the black saints. Never forget this. He know he can't just kill us over here, man. So he being China know that too. Yeah, the whole world know that. We are captives in this goddamn land. See, I've been told people that. People thought it was crazy. We hostages. We are hostages. They want to take, they let the whole world know we will kill the people of the Most High if you come one step closer.
Yelatinov, Ukrainian troops, together with NATO forces, tried to capture the city of Kurchatov, where the Kursk nuclear power plant is located. However, Ukrainian nationalists and Western militants have not been able to implement this plan. Moreover, General Yelatinov noted that the Ukrainian army and NATO forces will never be able to even approach the city of Kurchatov. The Ukrainian General Staff, together with the NATO bloc, threw 11,600 people into the Kursk region, including active duty soldiers and officers of the armies of Western countries. Using the surprise factor, they were supposed to capture the city of Kurchatov and the Kursk nuclear power plant by August 11th.
Come on, man. That's dangerous,
However,
man.
this powerful force, along with
NATO tried him, bro. I've been stuck. They tried him. They tried him. So I keep telling y'all, we're in a very dangerous time. It's gonna keep getting worse because they keep testing him. They keep testing him. They keep testing him, man. And they know what he's capable of. So I'm thinking, damn, these people really want the world wiped out and they really want to go in their bunkers. They got another plan, bro. Something is cooking. But winning a war, definitely not on the plate for them people.
With dozens of tanks have not been able to complete the task, General Yelatinov said. In addition, the commander of the Spetsnaz Akhmat also added that the Kiev regime used the entire remaining resource of the armed forces of Ukraine for the operation in the Kursk region. And this resource is now being systematically destroyed in the Kursk forests. General Yelatinov noted that by invading the Kursk region, the Kiev regime hoped to secure a strong position in the upcoming negotiations with Russia. However, instead, this pro-Western regime only worsened its situation and signed its own death warrant. General Yelatinov expressed confidence that the adventure of Zelensky and his Western masters to break into the Kursk region will lead to the fact that special military operation will be completed by the end of 2024, with the total victory of the Russian army and the surrender of the Kiev regime and its Western masters in Washington and London.
They definitely gonna pay now. That's why I know Putin faked him. See, he a chess master. He played dead, took the minds away from that particular area and allowed them to come on in. They came on in. See, he needed the Russian people to understand the dangers. All the Russians that didn't want war, hey, man, this ain't no conspiracy. Putin let war come to their doorsteps to remind Russia he need to finish off the head of the snake. This is about him dealing with NATO. He couldn't just start striking their capitals and the people he only been in Ukraine. No. Now he's telling his people, see, I told you. They want to take y'all riches. They want to rape your mothers, kill your mothers like they tried to do in World War II. Now the Russians are saying, we just listen, turn off the lights. The party's over. Do whatever you got to do.
War correspondents also confirmed the words of General Yelatinov. According to them, the Ukrainian armed forces lost about 2,000 soldiers and dozens of heavy military equipment, trying to approach the city of Kurchatov. At the moment, everything that is happening indicates that the Ukrainian armed forces refuse to seize the Kursk nuclear power plant located in the city of Kurchatov, and are trying to create a front line that will...
These people believe their own headlines, bro. That's their propaganda. They've been saying Putin have exhausted his military. Almost 1 million Russians dead. Nobody want to fight. Putin's overextended in Ukraine. They've been writing that crap and saying that crap on TV. Now, what they thought was if they send a heavily mechanized and weaponized military force on a blitzkrieg, and this was so crazy, they tried to pull a blitzkrieg. That is what the Germans tried to pull. These people is the Nazis. They tried to rush right into, that was a German move, the blitzkrieg. You just rush right into your opponent and try to overwhelm them and shock and awe them and overwhelm them with power, and then you defeat them like that. That failed miserably because Putin got plenty of soldiers, plenty of people willing to die for this shit.
Will run along such settlements as Lyubimovka, Pokrovsky, Lebedevka, and Kazakylaknya. In addition, the Ukrainian army has also intensified its attacks on the town of Sudza, with a population of 5,000 people. According to military journalist Gennady Alekin, as of August 15, 2024, the fighting in the Kursk region is underway mainly in the Sudzansky district. It is reported that after the Ukrainian armed forces failed to fulfill the main task and approached the city of Kurchatov, the Ukrainian High Military Command gave the order to capture the town of Sudza at any cost. However, due to the constant airstrikes by Russian combat aviation, the Ukrainian General Staff cannot begin transferring the main reserves of the armed forces to the Sudza area. In this regard, the Ukrainian army is trying to surround Sudza with the help of small groups. In the last 24 hours alone, Russian troops have managed to destroy 3 small groups of the armed forces of Ukraine northwest of the town of Sudza. Even Western military experts from numerous analytical centers admitted that as of August 15, 2024, the armed forces of Ukraine are fighting only several kilometers from the border of the Kursk region, near the settlement of Sudza. By the way, Western experts and analysts refuted Zelensky's words that the Ukrainian armed forces allegedly control 74 settlements in the Kursk region. According to them, the words of the Ukrainian leader resembled the ramblings of a crazy person. Most likely, he meant 74 houses, not settlements. Commenting on the actions of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kursk region, well-known German expert Franz Stefan Gatti said that the invasion of the Kursk region by the Ukrainian army is very beneficial to Russia. According to him, the short-term successes of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region may result in the defeat of the entire Ukrainian army in the long term. The German expert noted that, unlike Ukraine, Russia has huge resources and therefore Moscow benefits from expanding the front, which will inevitably lead to a crushing defeat of the armed forces of Ukraine in this war.
Too late now.
He noted that the Ukrainian High Military Command has already begun to transfer its units to the Kursk region from other directions of the front. And this fact is very beneficial to the Russian army, which continues to take control of dozens of settlements in Donbass.
They have not been paying attention to the Russian military. They don't want to chase you down and hunt you down all over the country. And they don't give a damn about taking over your whole country. They want to destroy all your military personnel. If you're willing to send your people to a kill zone, then they happy for you to do that. Zelensky is a madman. You can rush whoever you want into this. They now set the kill zone up. You're not finna overpower them. This is a suicide mission.
Bass.
They're in Russia. You people crazy.
The German expert expressed confidence that due to the constant attacks by Russian combat aviation, the Ukrainian General Staff will find it increasingly difficult to supply the units of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region, which will inevitably lead to the complete defeat of the Ukrainian army in the next 30-40 days. In general, reading the articles of reputable Western experts, it becomes clear that even they do not believe that the operation in the Kursk region can save the armed forces of Ukraine from final defeat. Meanwhile, Russian war correspondent Andrei Rudenko declared that Russian Marines from the 810th Separate Guards Brigade destroyed an entire elite unit of Ukrainian paratroopers from the 82nd Separate Airborne Assault Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. It is reported that the Ukrainian paratroopers were destroyed to the west of the settlement of Martinovka. Moreover, as it turned out, among the destroyed Ukrainian paratroopers there were also Polish mercenaries, who fought as part of this unit of the armed forces of Ukraine. In total, about 60 Ukrainian and Polish militants were killed near Martinovka. In addition, the Russian Marines also managed to capture the American armored fighting vehicle Stryker, which will be sent to Russian engineers for a thorough study. Well, as you can see, unlike last year's counteroffensive, the armed forces of Ukraine are now using formations of so-called foreign mercenaries to attack the Kursk region. Many of these foreign mercenaries are fighting in the Kursk region as part of the units of the Ukrainian army. It is reported that these are mainly Polish, French, and Georgian citizens. Moreover, many war correspondents have confirmed that the foreign fighters in the Kursk region are not ordinary mercenaries, but real active duty soldiers and officers of NATO allied countries.
Should be live on Rumble now. All right. So, Scott, how about we just begin since it's been quite an eventful last several weeks for you? How about we begin? There are kind of two things happening. One, there was the very chilling raid on your house by the FBI, and we also have an invasion coordinated, of course, with the assistance of NATO and the United States, but Ukraine has invaded Kursk. How about we begin with just, you have been doing so much work around building peace, developing improved U.S. Russia relations, especially people to people ties. Could you talk about how these parallel developments, what has happened to you and what is happening in this conflict, are related, and perhaps how it motivates your ongoing work despite all that has been going on for you?
Well, I guess let's go back to 2022. Once upon a time, I published a book called Disarmament in the Time of Perestroika, Arms Control and the End of the Soviet Union. It was a memoir and a history of my experience as a weapons inspector implementing the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty between the United States and Russia. And it wasn't just a history of the treaty, but it was also a story of my personal transformation from somebody who had spent all my meaningful adult life up until that point learning how to kill Russians, training, singly focused on killing Russians, closing with and destroying the Soviet enemy through firepower maneuver. And suddenly to find myself thrust into literally the middle of the Soviet Union in the city of Vodkinsk, outside the Vodkinsk machine building plant, monitoring the production of Soviet intercontinental ballistic missiles. And in the process, living amongst the enemy, the Soviets, the Russians, and realizing that, after not just living amongst them, but working with them, learning about them, seeing them as fellow human beings, realizing that I didn't really want to kill these people anymore, that what I had been doing made no sense. And that led me down the path of believing that nuclear war should be avoided at all costs. The treaty that I implemented was the first treaty to eliminate an entire class of nuclear delivery systems, intermediate range missiles. It helped stabilize the world. I believe it helped save the world. And I became a big believer in arms control and a big believer in, avoiding conflicts, of repairing relations between nations. Never forget that when I went to the Soviet Union initially in 1988, we still referred to them as the evil empire, and they referred to us as enemy number one. And when I left, we considered ourselves to be friends. So, that's the background. So I wrote this book, and in talking to people, um, I realized that this wasn't just history. This was a template for the future. Um, that when people say, well, how can we get out of this mess we're in between Russia and the United States? This is after the initiation of the special military operation. There's no hope. And I said, well, wait a minute, there is hope. We already did it, because the Cold War was just as bad or worse than what was going on in 2022. And I said, so, this book can be not just to teach you about the past, but maybe chart a path towards the future. So I started talking about, how to improve relations, the importance of improving relations. And that's when I was invited to go to Russia, because the Russians were listening to this message, and they said, we like what we're hearing. I'm not talking about the Russian government, I'm talking about the Russian people. They're saying, yeah, give us some more of this, people to people stuff. And they like the fact that I was open to learning more about Russia, to consider their point of view, to do as John F. Kennedy asked every American to do in his American University speech in June of 1963, to spend some time in the shoes of your adversary, to contemplate life from their perspective. And so, I was invited to go to Russia. I did travel to Russia, and the trip was a great success. The book was translated into Russian. I had a fantastic book tour in Russia, and it looked like this concept of people-to-people diplomacy, promoting peace, was getting some traction. Scared the crap out of the American government. Scared the living dog poop out of them. And it turns out that I guess the U.S. government doesn't trust its citizens to have a mind of their own, to think that maybe there's a better way of doing things than that of the government solution. That my way or the highway is the government position. But the Biden administration was married to a policy of confrontation, and I guess I should be honored. The more successful I got, the more afraid they became of what was going on, and they have concocted out of plain cloth a case that I'm somehow operating under the direction of the Russian government, taking their orders and furthering their policies to the detriment of American policies. I find this stunning, though, because U.S. government knows who I am. I've been around a while. I was in the U.S. government. I wasn't a general, but hell, they knew who I was because I functioned in some very important positions that I guess raised my profile, so to speak. And the notion that Scott Ritter would take instructions from the Russian government to the detriment of the United States of America, it just it doesn't fly. I'm the most patriotic person you're going to meet. I'm a fanatic about my country, a fanatic. But the thing about being a fanatic means that maybe I define my country different than some Americans do. You see, I believe in the Constitution. I took an oath to it, to uphold and defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And the Constitution begins, "We the people of the United States." Abraham Lincoln, and referring to the formation of the nation, spoke of government of the people, by the people, for the people. And the Constitution has some very important amendments. The Bill of Rights, number one of which is free speech. And when we look at the struggle of free speech in America, maybe there's no greater instance of the defense of free speech and the importance of free speech than Daniel Ellsberg's publication of the Pentagon Papers back in 1971. The United States government took the New York Times to task, and this went to the Supreme Court, the United States versus the New York Times. And the Supreme Court found 6-3 that the U.S. government couldn't prevent the New York Times from publishing this. And Justice Hugo Black wrote a concurring opinion, and he basically just lambasted the idea that the government can tell the American people what to say. That government can interfere with the press. He said it can't happen. A free press, he said, a free press is for the governed to hold the governors accountable, not the other way around. What part of that doesn't the FBI get? You don't get to dictate what free press is. I'm sorry. I know you got a badge. You got a fancy blue jacket with big yellow letters on the back. And I know you can cuff me and put me in jail, but screw you. And to the FARA enforcement unit, screw you as well. You don't get to do that. If you want to fight, you got it right here. Okay? Let me tell you about the United States Marine Corps. We don't run, we don't hide, and we don't just sit there and take it. I will fricking go on the offensive here. All right? They have accused me of being an agent of Russia because I wrote a damn article. I wrote an article about Russophobia. I wrote an article about the dangers of Russophobia. And I used as a source for this article an essay written by Anatoly Antonov, the Russian ambassador. You see, I had visited the Russian embassy. Oh, Scott, you shouldn't have. Screw you. I just told you that I was going to Russia on a book tour. Now, come on, people, put on your thinking cap for a second. I'm going to go to Russia on a book tour. A former intelligence officer is going to go to Russia on a book tour. And I want to have it to be a successful book tour. So I went to the Russian embassy to brief them on what I was going to do, not to take orders from them, but to tell them what I was planning on doing so that I didn't end up in a Russian jail with the Russians saying an intelligence officer came to our country and was running around doing stuff. I wanted to say, this is what I'm doing. Don't be afraid about it. Do you have any questions about what I'm about to do so that, I can make this thing go off smoothly? And the Russians appreciated me doing this. They said, thank you very much. They actually, I believe, wrote a memorandum back to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to say, yeah, Ritter's coming. He talked to us about it. Seems like it's a legit trip. Maybe you don't arrest him. But we also had a conversation. And at that point in time, they said, hey, the ambassador wrote this essay. And I said, cool. And they said, I said, why don't you get it published? And they said, well, New York Times, Washington Post won't touch it. I said, well, that's too bad. And they said, you think you could help us get it published? I said, I don't know. Call Nation Magazine, call Consortium News. I said, I'll see. And I did. And Nation never responded. Consortium News said, no, we ain't running something directly from the Russian embassy. And I said, that ain't going to happen. But what I'll do is I'll write my own article. So I did. Now, it's curious. The FBI, when they came to the house, was questioning me. And one of the agents, they had all my communications. Of course they do. They've been monitoring me for a while. And they presented me with the email chain. And she says, you were working on behalf of the Russian government. I said, are you high? Do you know what journalism is? Do you understand the concept of a source, incorporating the source? Did you read the damn article? The article lays out exactly what happened, how I got this essay, why I decided to write it, what it was. My initiative. The concept of Russophobia was something that I highlighted in a speech I gave on February 19th, or I didn't give, but I published, I think, on the 10th. I was supposed to deliver it live on February 19th at the Rage Against the War Machine, but the libertarians didn't want me to be there. So I published it in my Substack. But it's, talks about the importance of addressing Russophobia. I'm the one that raised the issue of Russophobia that prompted him to say, oh, well, the ambassador just wrote an essay. The concept that I'm under the direction of the Russians is the most insulting stupidity possible. And the idea that the FBI gets to say, this is journalism, this isn't journalism. Screw you. The Supreme Court says otherwise, pal. The Supreme Court says that I, as an American citizen, I, as a journalist, get to define this. And, this is it. So that's it. That article got the government saying Scott Ritter works for the frickin' Russians. And then I went to Russia on that book tour, scared the crap out of them because it was a big success. Got a lot of publicity. Things were working. And now, now I'm working for the Russians to try and change American politics. This becomes political. And if you go and read the FARA regulation, it basically is a law that gives the United States the ability to do anything it wants to anybody who dares interact with a foreign government in any way. It's a very loosely written regulation. And again, I go to the First Amendment. The Congress of the United States shall not pass any laws that infringe on freedom of speech or free press.
Revolutionary salute to our brother FBA Raw for the $5 donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life, and I absolutely appreciate the love, family. Salute.
Well, FAR is written by the Congress of the United States. It's a law, and it's being used by the executive to infringe on free speech and a free press. This is war, baby. This is war. If that's what they want, that's what they got. So what I'm hoping is that the FBI, having seized my electronics and will review them, will realize, because I don't know what they thought they were going to find. Secret communications that they didn't already have, covert means of communications. I don't know. Maybe we did some fancy stuff. I don't know what they thought they were going to get. The warrant was specifically only to electronics. Although the irony is, and I tried to tell the FBI, I said, my job is sort of defined by A, telling the truth, and B, not backing down when people confront me. I mentioned my experience as a weapons inspector in Iraq and the fact that, gosh, back then the US government viewed me as a shill of Saddam. How dare you travel to Iraq and make a documentary film that 30 some odd years later is the most accurate depiction of what was going on. Everything in the documentary film was correct. You wrote an article talking about the qualitative disarmament of Iraq that turned out to be 100% correct. How dare you be right on the issue of weapons of mass destruction? The U.S. government would have arrested me, called me a foreign agent working on behalf of Iraq because I dared say that U.S. policy was wrong, that U.S. policy was factually inaccurate. The thing that gave me the ability to confront the United States government successfully there were the receipts I had from 7 years of work as a weapons inspector. And what I mean by receipts, I mean the documents. You see, when I realized in the summer of 1998 that the U.S. government was getting ready to shut everything down and start promulgating the big lie, I started preserving the documentary evidence. And when I left, I had an archive. And that archive I used frequently. I would know that, for instance, I went on the Phil Donahue show, and Richard Butler, my former boss, was there. And Butler was saying that everything I was saying was a lie, everything was that. So I brought a bag full of documents. And live on TV, he called me a liar. And I said, "You want me to open up the bag, Richard? I've got every receipt, every request that I made to you, signed by you right now. You want me to open it, Richard? Because it'll show that you're the liar." And Phil Donahue said, "Well, we don't want to do that." Richard got scared because I have the receipts. The receipts empowered me. Well, while they're inspecting my house, or I wouldn't say inspecting, taking my house apart, looking for electronics, they went down the basement and they opened up the my file cabinets, and they see the documents. Now, some of the documents are provided by foreign governments, including the United States, and they would have very few of them, but some of them classification markings on them. Secret, release to UNSCOM. And the FBI came up, "Scott, we have a problem here." I said, "What's your problem?" "Well, we found documents." I said, "Well, there's your first problem. You're not supposed to be looking for documents. You're supposed to be looking for electronics." "Yes, but there's classified markings." I said, "No, there's not. It's not a classified marking." I said, "Look, you're the FBI. You're the National Security Division. We've done this before in 1998 when you were going to arrest me and prosecute me for espionage because I took material that the United States gave to the United Nations and I took it to Israel, ordered by the United Nations in coordination with the CIA to do analysis. I was doing my job. But somebody in the FBI decided that because the United States chose to mark this information secret, releasable UNSCOM, that I was taking U.S. secrets to Israel. And so the FBI was going to arrest me. Fortunately for me, the CIA General Counsel wrote a memorandum to the FBI saying, "No, that's not how it works. You see, we may mark it secret, but the moment we give it to UNSCOM, it's automatically declassified because UNSCOM is the international organization. They can't retain secret information." They're not an independent classification authority. There's no information provided to UNSCOM can be classified. So everything is unclassified. And I said, you guys know that because you've done this before to me. So, well, we have to take this material anyways. So the FBI took my, I don't know how many pages, 70, 80,000 pages worth of my archive. The archive, the history of the UN inspections of the Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. They promised they'd give it back once they did the review. I don't know. I mean, the people that came to my house were very professional, very courteous. I have no reason to impugn their integrity, but I don't trust them. And I'll tell you why. Because somebody, maybe not them, maybe somebody else, provided an affidavit to a federal magistrate judge that said there was probable cause to search my house. That means that they told the judge that they needed to gain entry into my house and gain access to my computer and my cell phone because there was probable cause that something was on that computer and cell phone that would further their case that I was a foreign agent of Russia. There's nothing that would further the case. They have all the communications. They've been listening to my calls. They've been monitoring my emails. So somebody made something up, and that's disturbing. That's very disturbing. So am I supposed to believe these guys when they say, well, give me the archive back? I can tell you right now, that's the second war we're going to have. I'm going to win the first battle first, which is the battle over the concept that the FBI and the Department of Justice gets to determine what journalism is or isn't, and that they can hold journalists accountable for doing their job. So we're going to fight that one first. Hopefully it won't be a fight. Hopefully the FBI realizes that they don't have anything. They don't have a case and they just drop it. But then we go to phase two, which is give me my damn archive back because that's mine. And I use it. I write articles, I write books. I'm in the process of writing a book that makes use of this archive. And so they need to return it. But it's just a very disconcerting, unsettling experience. I mean, it's if you don't know what it's like to have, 20 to 30 armed individuals, they never threaten me. When I say armed, I don't want people to think that they were running around, threatening to point a gun. They're FBI agents. They carry weapons. But still, it's sort of disconcerting. They all have weapons and handcuffs, which carries the inherent threat of we can shoot you and cuff you anytime we want to. And what can you do? Nothing, not a damn thing. So it's disconcerting to have them come in here and, again, they didn't destroy my house. I give them that. They were very respectful. I give them that, but it's an unpleasant experience nonetheless. And, they've cost me, thousands of dollars. The reason why we're able to do this tonight is I had to get a new computer. I had to get a new phone. I had to, get my wife a new iPad so that she can do her thing because they took all the electronics. We even went and bought a new TV because I tell you what, we had one of those Samsung LED TVs. And as soon as the FBI left, I'm not accusing you of anything, but you know what you did. The TV, which can be turned into a listening device. Anybody who knows anything knows that that's how it works. And it just started screwing up. And so I said, screw it, we're getting rid of this TV too. So we got rid of the TV. We bought a new TV. I'm sure they did technical penetration of the house. I'm sure they're listening to this right now. I'm waving to the camera so they can see my best angle. I don't care, but it is a little bit disconcerting to have the federal government do that because while I'm not going to predict the outcome, and I hope that these people are people of honor who take their oath to the Constitution seriously, there are enough horror stories out there about the abuses of power. Just ask Mike Flynn. Just ask Donald Trump. I mean, if they can screw with the president of the United States, again, we're talking about the National Security Division of the FBI, Operation Crossfire Hurricane, the falsification of the Russian collusion case, charges by the FBI, the manipulation of Christopher Steele and his fake sources by the FBI to take down the president of the United States. They could do it to the president. They could do it to anybody in the United States. They have absolute power, literally unchecked power. And we're totally dependent upon the honor of the individuals who carry that badge and carry that gun. the people seem to be honorable people that came here, but the proof is in the pudding. Let's see what they do. Right now, the ball's in their court. And again, I'm confident, absolutely confident, they will find nothing on the computers because there's nothing on the computers. But I'm also nervous that they did this the way they did it. Because again, if this was just concern, the Fair Enforcement Union.
See, they might try to plant some child P word on his laptop or some stuff like that. Scott better be very careful, man.
Sends out a letter of inquiry. It's a very polite letter. It says, "Dear Mr. Ritter, we're the Fair Enforcement Unit, and we believe that you are engaged in activities that would require you to register as a foreign agent. This is what we believe you're doing, and we'd like you to give us your version of the stories, provide documents, etc." Very civil. Could have been done that way. They opted to raid my house, daytime raid, press, and now you understand the consequences of it, because now it's looming out there because the press is stupid. The mainstream media is ignorant and dumb, especially the Albany one. The Albany Times Union is one of the worst newspapers in the world, especially about local stories. They have to gin it up and spin it up. And, so now it's out there and it's all, well, the FBI went to his house. Where there's smoke, there's fire. You don't realize that the FBI set the fire that made the smoke. I mean, it's, and so that's hanging out there. People are just like, wow, why did the FBI go to you? I just told you why. But there has to be another reason, isn't there? I don't know. They didn't articulate another reason. I can't think of another reason they would come. I didn't think they were ever going to come because I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't violating the law. But it's just disconcerting in the extreme. But this is a big deal. This is a very big deal. And every journalist out there, especially independent alternative media journalists, there before the grace of God go you. You're especially advocacy journalists, people who believe in a cause and are pushing that cause. And if that cause has anything to do with the foreign policy of the United States, and you go to Venezuela and you interview somebody there, you're next. If you go to China and you interview somebody there, you're next. So you're not allowed to be a journalist if the advocacy journalism that you're pursuing happens to coincide with the ideas that are being promulgated by a foreign government. And so this is a big, big deal, a huge deal. And I'm hoping that, the alternative, media community out there understands this and rallies behind it, not because you like me. Look, I get it. I'm abrasive and, I have my opinions and all that kind of stuff. I don't care if you like me or not. I really don't. But you should care about what's happening here, because if they win this, they're not going to, but if they do, you're next. It's the end of independent journalism, especially independent advocacy journalism that is in opposition to the policies of the United States, the foreign policy of the United States. The way the fire regulation is written, the second you say, I'm writing a story that's designed to educate the American people about the failure of American policy, they'll say, you're trying to change the mindset of the American people on behalf of that government. Therefore, you must register as a foreign agent. This is a battle for everybody.
No, I mean, those are all really good points. This is what happened during the Cold War a lot in the United States as well. We've even seen in the last few years with people like Amalia Shatela, who, especially targeting people who've traveled, especially to Russia. That's why I asked you about tying it into Kursk, because I feel like there is this target on you, Scott, because of your travels to Russia and what you are trying to accomplish. And to label it as the work of a foreign agent is a huge way of discrediting this kind of work, which is really all about building relationships that can bind us together in opposition to, as you said, a foreign policy that is moving and pushing toward nuclear war and all the catastrophes that come before the nuclear war, which we are seeing play out so grimly in Ukraine right now. So all of your points very very well taken, Scott. I did want to, in the interest of time, and of course you can tie everything into this, but I wanted to ask you about the Kursk offensive, because there's a lot of fog of war around the Kursk offensive right now. Russia is saying that they are just absolutely obliterating NATO, U.S. armored vehicles, more than a couple thousand Ukrainian soldiers. I mean, this is just over a week, I believe, since this started, and a couple thousand Ukrainian troops have been killed. Civilians have been killed by Ukrainian troops. There's the attack on the nuclear power plant there. So there have been fragments of missiles found on the complex. Could you talk about what is happening in the Kursk offensive that the Western mainstream media right now, and of course the entirety of the United States NATO axis, they are all celebrating this literal invasion of Russian territory? So what's going on?
Well, generally, when we talk about issues of this nature, I say right up front, I'm thousands of miles away, distant from the problem, and I'm a prisoner of the same data set that you and everybody else has. What we can get, on um, on the internet, from newspapers, from interviews that other people do. Um, but in this case, it's different. And again, you asked in the beginning, how you tie in what happened to me with the FBI and what's going on in Kursk. You may have noticed that there's a Chechen um, gentleman named Abdi Aladanov. He's a major general in the Russian armed forces, um, and he is the commander of the Akhmat Special Forces, which is more than just Chechens. It includes the special forces of the Russian Federation. It includes a Wagner element that transitioned over to the Russian Ministry of Defense and operates as part of the Akhmat Special Forces and some other units. And these are the units that responded quickly to deal with the Kursk situation. I know Abdi Aladanov pretty well. We've met several times. I've interviewed him several times. I've had personal conversations with him several times. I feel comfortable enough to say that when I know him well enough to know the man behind the voice. So when I see Abdi Aladanov on TV talking or on his videos talking, I can listen to the tenor of his voice. I can look at his eyes. I can see, what's going on behind his eyes. And it tells a story that for the average person, you wouldn't be able to get. First of all, I would tell you that he's not panicked at all. There's no panic in the man. When he's a Chechen, remember, Abdi is a hero of Russia. I mean, literally, he's got the medal. But he's done some amazing things from a warrior standpoint. He in the Second Chechen War, he made a decision that he uh, wasn't going to continue to fight the Russians because the Chechen cause, had been hijacked by the West, by the CIA, who was bringing in radical, non-Chechen Wahhabist, jihadists, and so he went over and joined up with Akhmat Kadyrov, the father of Ramzan Kadyrov, and he began to fight the jihadists. One of the jihadists was a guy named Shamil Basayev. Shamil Basayev was a Chechen who fought in Abkhazia against the Georgians in 1993, 1992, 1993, and then later fought against the Russians. He's the guy who did the Beslan school massacre. He's responsible for some of the worst atrocities. And when Abdi went over and to the Russian side with Akhmat Kadyrov, um, uh, Shamil Basayev killed his uncles, his brothers, his cousins, slaughtered Abdi's family. Abdi went into the mountains with a handful of Chechen special forces. and spent several months hunting down Shamil Basayev's band, more than 100 guys, and eventually played a role in killing every single one of them, including Shamil Basayev. This is a serious dude. This is the real deal. And so, there's no panic in his voice because he's not going to panic, but he's as honest as the day is long. I mean, the guy just
Ukrainians
doesn't know how to tell a lie. And he's, if you listen, he's the one voice that said the Ministry of Defense has lied to itself so many times that they start to believe their lies. He's the only Russian official saying that. And he can get away with it because he's on the front line dealing with the consequences of these lies. What happened in Kursk is the incompetence of the Russian Ministry of Defense that left a critical area on the border unguarded. I mean, you can't put poorly trained 18-year-old conscripts assigned to the border guard, on the border and expect them to stand up against what turned out to be, elements of the 18 best units in the Ukrainian armed forces, the best equipped units, the best trained units, the best prepared units, who came in operating with American intelligence using total spectrum warfare, advanced communication systems, using artificial intelligence based upon real-time intelligence to predict Russian movements, to anticipate gaps and then to exploit these gaps. There was no one behind these guys. They came through and off they went. And it was Opti's job to come in and clean this mess up. And he's done it. He's doing it. Slaughtering the Ukrainians. I mean, he's killed thousands of them. He's destroying all of their equipment, and it's over. All that's left now is to kill those who are starting to dig in. Don't believe anything you're seeing on Western TV. Don't believe any of the garbage that comes out on the Ukrainian Twitter. It's just, believe Opti Aladanov. Now here's where it comes in. I right now could pick up the phone and contact Opti right now, but I'm concerned. I'm a journalist, but would I be, digging my own grave to call Opti Aladanov right now and get an interview to talk about what's going on? There's a hesitancy here. Now, I'm going to tell you that hopefully next week that hesitancy will go away because I have put in the request formally so that it's done, so no one can say, well, it's personal, you're taking, this is only because you work for the Russians that you're able to talk to Opti. I've gone in and made the formal request through other channels, and hopefully I'll be able to have this conversation. But journalists have their sources. Opti Aladanov, I'm not calling him my source. I don't want to get him in trouble. He's a very responsible individual, but I do have his contact information, and he is making press appearances. And under normal circumstances, I would have picked this damn thing up and I'd be able to sit here and tell you tonight, yeah, I just got off the phone with Opti Aladanov and this is what he said. But because of this ongoing FBI investigation, I have to be very, very careful on how I proceed. And that's not what a free press is. That's not what a free press is. And you know what? The U.S. government doesn't want me talking to Opti Aladanov. They don't want that truth out there. The U.S. government right now is working with CNN to promulgate crap, and more crap. I just want to remind everybody out there, including the FBI, because I know you're here tonight. Welcome. And again, thank you for not shooting my dogs when you came in my house. I really appreciate you letting me put them in the backyard. But, you don't get to, you don't get to do what you're doing. You don't get to dictate these stories. You are part of a national security establishment that declassifies intelligence and releases it to the press for the purpose of manipulating public opinion. You want to know how I know that? Because you admit that the intelligence you declassify is wrong, and you know it's wrong. You know it's not accurate. and yet you release it to the press as if it's accurate. So the press can say declassified intelligence shows that Russia, that China, and you do it, you're lying to the American people using the mainstream media as a vehicle to tell these lies, to manipulate public opinion. You know what the watchguard against this manipulation of data by the US government is? You and me. We're the watchguards. We're the guys that bark. We're the guys that say, not on our watch. Not on our watch. And right now, the US government is spreading lies to CNN, to MSNBC, to all the major news networks, to the New York Times, lies, lies, and lies. They get published to an American audience that goes, well, it's the New York Times, it must be true. No, it's a lie. All of it's a lie. The antidote to the lies is the truth that comes from independent media that goes out there and finds real sources of information, like Abdi Aladanov. They don't want you to hear from Abdi Aladanov. They want to manipulate. And here's the FBI, who knows this is taking place and indeed on some occasions has participated in the charade itself. They have corrupted mainstream media, turned it into little more than a stenographer for government lies. And they had the audacity to say that my journalism needs to be categorized as the byproduct of a relationship with a foreign government that is directive in nature. I can tell you, Abdi Aladanov isn't calling me up saying, Scott, you have to call me so that I can talk to you. The Russian government's not saying, Scott, we need you to pursue talking points A, B, and C. That's not what happens. Scott Ritter wakes up in the morning and says, look at the lies being told by the US government. How can I overcome these lies with the truth? And how can I gain access to that truth? By going to Russia, meeting with people like Abdi Aladanov, establishing relations so that when the time comes, you can gain access to this information. It doesn't mean that you take everything that's said at face value. No, the job of a journalist is to be skeptical. But at least now I've received information from a source I trust that I can evaluate and then weigh off against what's being told elsewhere and use my experience to say, this is what I think's happening. This is what I think is happening, not what's being dictated from above by the Russian government. I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, Danny, but this is a very dangerous time in the United States. We are on the cusp, because let's talk about Kursk for a second. I just want to also remind people what happened in Kursk is that NATO invaded Russia. NATO invaded Russia. NATO invaded Russia. This isn't, Russia invaded Ukraine, so the Ukrainians get to attack Russia. No, Russia didn't invade Ukraine. Russia responded to Ukrainian war crimes that were put in place after the 2014 Maidan coup, backed by the CIA, part of an effort of using Ukraine to bring down Russia. And the Ukrainian ultranationalists had spent a decade slaughtering ethnic Russians and Russian-speaking people in the Donbass. And Russia finally said enough is enough, and they came in to end that. This is a special military operation designed to preserve the rights of a Russian population that was being subjected to cultural genocide and subjected to mass murder. Ukraine doesn't get to commit a crime and then say, but since you're holding us accountable to that crime, we're going to invade Russia. But it's not even Ukraine invading Russia. You see, the force that's going in is a force that's hand-built by NATO. I just interviewed a Russian senator. He's the head of the Veterans Committee, very close to Putin, very close to the Ministry of Defense, and he's down in Kursk right now. And he said, we being the Russians have captured a lot of equipment and a lot of people, and we're putting it together. He said this group that came in is equipped to the highest modern NATO standards, better than most NATO units. They use full spectrum dominance theories. They have Starlink connectivity at the vehicle level, sometimes at the small unit level. And all of this is fed up through satellites down to back down to the command staff to get real-time location. They can track the movement of their forces. They have real-time intelligence coming in saying where the Russians are, and they use artificial intelligence to not only maneuver, but to deploy new drones, a new generation of drones, high-speed drones, AI-driven drones that flood the battlefield. This is the NATO army, the Polish-speaking, French-speaking, English-speaking NATO army that invaded Russia at the command of NATO. This wasn't the initiative of the Ukrainian government. This was something that NATO planned. NATO is executing. The Russians have the receipts, and but they also have all of the equipment, and they've reverse engineered it. And they said, "Wow, you guys came in with the best you got, and it's pretty damn good. It was impressive." But Opti Eladanov has come in, and he's impressive. One of Opti's specialties, and this is why he's been promoted so rapidly, is that he is a quick learner. And when you go on the battlefield and you experience things, you adapt. You come up with new concepts, new tactics, new operational theories. And they pulled Opti out of the battlefield and sent him to the General Staff Academy, not only to learn from others, but to teach people too about his experience. And you see these generals, these officers come from the battlefield, and they share their experiences. And then that gets turned around into interim doctrine that's published down. And the Russian army is always learning, always getting better. And right now from Kursk, there's a whole new set of lessons learned that are being fed back into the Russian, military education system to educate everybody from the private to the general about what the hell's going on with this new technology. But this is a serious thing. NATO invaded Russia. People, you got to understand that if the Russians went to Mexico and brought in Colombians and brought in Venezuelans and brought in Cubans, and next thing you know, 25,000 of them with the best equipment, organized, crossed the border and captured Columbus, New Mexico, and Pancho Villa Part 2, we'd be going to war against Mexico, and we'd be going to war against Russia. You don't get to invade the United States and not expect to pay a price. NATO invaded Russia, and so there will be a Russian response. That's the other thing this senator said, is that sometime in the not too distant future, and he said you'll know it when it happens, but Ukraine is going to pay a very, very heavy price. And he said, so too will NATO. He said that the concept of NATO bases in Poland and Romania that are being used, for instance, to house F-16s, being able to operate without consequence is no longer part of the reality. We are so close to a direct conflict between Russia and NATO. Right now, it's a proxy conflict, but we are so close to a direct conflict, which means we're very close to a nuclear war, which means we're all very close to dying. NATO invaded Russia, and you got the Germans. I mean, the Germans have gone insane. The Germans have literally gone insane. You have German officers, retired and active duty, sort of smirking. Yes, we know German tanks are back in Kursk, and we know what happened the last time we're there, and we're happy that things are different this time. Jawohl, mein Herr. Jawohl. I mean, that's what happened. You scratch a German, you get a Nazi. You guys think I'm joking? The German military just tried to slip something through. I don't know if you heard about this, because they've the remilitarization, again, scratch a German, get a Nazi. They've decided they want to become a militarized society again, and so they've elevated the Wehrmacht in World War II to some sort of revered status, where now Germans are allowed to revere the memory of those who served in the Wehrmacht during the Second World War, forgetting for a moment that they did serve Adolf Hitler. But no, these were simple German soldiers, and they must be revered. And so they slipped in. They said, yeah, we'd also like to revere the SS and the SD and all those other Nazi organizations. We want them to be revered too. And fortunately, there was somebody in German civil society that went, "What? No, no!" And the German army had to pull back. But the fact that the German army thought that this was a good thing tells you about the sickness of that. This is scary. This is scary. We have Germany acting like, this is a cool thing to have German tanks on Russian soil killing Russians. It's not a cool thing. It's not. It's a very dangerous thing. And yet, all the NATO and NAFO and whatever the hell you want to call them cheerleaders out there, they're acting like this is great. Ukraine's in Kursk. Well, first of all, they're all going to die or be taken prisoner. Very few of them are going to survive. Russia's already blown away all of the logistical support infrastructure in Sumy, which is on the Ukrainian side of the border, and they've blown up the tanks. They've run out of gas, and so the Ukrainians right now are digging in. They're going to run out of ammunition. Then they're all going to die. That's just the reality of it. Is Opti Aladanov is very confident. And again, I've met the guy. I know the guy. I look at his eyes. I listen to the tenor of his voice. This isn't a guy that's put. Now, for all the people out there, that Chechens are TikTok warriors. TikTok fake warriors. I'll tell you a little story. So I'm in Moscow, and Steven Seagal had asked to meet me. And after we met, I get a phone call, and he says, "Hey, I'd like to invite you out to dinner." And so myself and my host, Alexander Zarianov, went there with Steven, his son, and his entourage. And a very pleasant evening. But I had been trying to meet with Opti Aladanov, but he was at the General Staff Academy, so it's very difficult to get up. But the phone rings, and it's Opti. He says, "Hey, I'm available." And so we turned to Steven Seagal and said, "Hey, do you mind if Opti Aladanov joins us?" And he's like, "Never met him before." He's like, "Sure." And so Opti comes in, and it's pretty fun to introduce Opti to Steven Seagal and the conversation that took place. But so Opti's there, and I'm just a impudent, junior Marine officer at heart, and so I said something like, because he, Opti, being a Chechen warrior, is putting digs in at the Marines, and I'm putting digs in back at him, and but I said, "Come on, man, you're a general. What the hell do you know about fighting? You're in the rear with the gear." Oh, that pissed him off. He pulls out his cell phone, and he's a nice guy. He wasn't that angry at me, but he was a little perturbed that I said what I said. And he starts opening up videos, and he said, "Do generals do the forward reconnaissance when when their unit goes into combat?" He's showing him on a BMP, driving in there. Then they take fire, and they get a call that a BMP had been hit, and a couple of the Chechen soldiers were wounded and needed to be evacuated. And there were no other units available at that time, heavy fighting. And so Opti jumps in the BMP and drives it up to the guys. He gets out, and he's laying down suppressive fire. You hear the rounds going over his head, bing, 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 bing. The Chechen next to him gets hit. He's down. Opti's boom, boom, smiling on his face, patches up this guy, evacuates this guy, gets him out, gets him in, fires off some more rounds, and then drives the damn BMP away. A major general in the Russian army just went in and rescued wounded Chechens under fire and evacuated them personally. And I went, "Okay, I guess you're not a TikTok warrior." No, he's the real deal. I told you that this is a real leader.
See, when the Ukraine-Russia war first started, CNN, Western media was laughing at Russian colonels and lieutenants, and they lost some generals. They was dying in the war. And Scott Ritter and other people used to tell them it's because they fight with their soldiers. They're not the high ranking. They in bunkers, but the Russian you have to lead from the front. You have to be in the mix with your soldiers, or it's not like the Western media. I mean the Western military, where everything is far away from the battlefield. They generals and shit. Nah, not the Russian generals. They in the mix. That's why they win
Um,
wars.
but it was an interesting night. Never, ever, ever, ever impugn the courage of a Chechen. They will kick your ass, and I'm thankful that Opti didn't gut me on sight. He when I met him in Chechnya, he presented me with this presentation knife. It's the real deal. And I'm just thankful that that night he didn't pull it out and decide to remove my liver and cook it up with some garlic and a little bit of Chianti. But so
So, Scott, I wanted to just transition to the overall battlefield because, on the one hand, you have NATO via Ukraine invading Russia. And on the other, all of the Western mainstream media is saying that Russia is not rushing its forces from the front line, from the Donetsk area or any other area, to Kursk. And this is one of the troubling signs, or the risks, as The Economist calls it, that perhaps Ukraine is gambling on a losing bet. So, Scott, what's happening overall right now in the conflict? Because Kursk, everyone has their attention on Kursk. It is very significant. It's obviously incredibly dangerous, as you have reminded us. But what overall is happening right now on the front lines that perhaps is related to this Kursk offensive, and why it's happening, and also just what it really says about where the conflict is going overall?
well, I mean, we should remember that before Kursk went down, the Russians have been carrying out their offensive operations in the Donbass, in Zaporizhia, and to a lesser extent in Kherson. Kherson is primarily a holding action. Um, but I don't know if I have my. I went to the gym. I don't know if the shirt's on backwards or not. I just looked at the seams. I might have it inside out. That's okay. It's just a new style. Um, but that's what happens when you rush back from the gym. You're, sorry.
I appreciate that you rushed.
But the well, I actually rushed back from pizza with my wife. But prior to that, I was doing some stuff. Scott's retard moment. Hey, sorry, man. There is. It is what it is. I told you I had a difficult week, so you got to forgive me a little bit. But no, the Russians have been on the offensive, and it's an offensive that is premised on the notion of attrition warfare, and the goal is to wear down the Ukrainians to the point of total collapse. And the Russians have pretty much achieved this. The Ukrainians are in a desperate situation right now. The Russians are making, critical gains on a daily basis. 5 kilometers here, 6 kilometers there, 10 kilometers there. Some places, 500 meters, and some places 100 meters. But they're advancing all along the line of contact, and the Ukrainians don't have any reserves to plug the hole. So as they fall back, it's not like they're falling back on a prepared position with fresh troops. The exhausted troops have just had to leave an untenable position or falling back to an equally untenable position. And the next day, the Russians are going to push them back and keep pushing them back until all the Ukrainians are killed or surrendered or captured. There's nothing left. Zelensky's been saying he has 9 brigades. So I got 9 brigades of equipment, but I only have 3 brigades of men. I think it was I got 9 brigades of men, but I only have 3 brigades of equipment or something of that nature. Whatever, but he said that's going to be used for this counteroffensive, this offensive they launched. And the Ukrainian army, the guys on the front lines are like, hey, those 20,000 guys with all the new toys, all the M1 tanks. How many M1 tanks have been blown up in Kursk right now? A whole bunch. How many Leopard tanks? A whole bunch. How many Bradleys? A whole bunch. How many Strikers? A whole bunch. How many Martyrs? This is all brand new Western equipment. It's all being blown up in Kursk instead of being brought down to stabilize the front lines in the Donbass. And so while we're all talking about Kursk, the Russians keep it. Now, some people say that Kursk was designed to get the Russians to take the troops that were on the offensive in that area and bring them up, and thereby buy the forces their time. That didn't work. If you look at Abdi al-Adanov's the force that he has, I mentioned the second Special Forces Brigade. But one of the units that's under his command right now is the 810th Marine Brigade, and that's the brigade that it fought in the Battle of Mariupol, and it's been fighting in the Zaporizhia area in a relatively static part of the lines. That's been pulled out, and so the Russians did pull forces out that were more or less engaged in positional warfare. But they didn't pull any of the maneuver forces, the forces that are actively maneuvering against Ukraine. They all stayed engaged. They all still have their, ammunition supplies, their fuel allocations. They are operating according to plan. The Kursk invasion didn't disrupt the Russian offensive operations at all. Russia pulled troops out of Belarus, including some former Wagner units. Russia has brought in troops from other parts of Russia, and Russia has deployed reserves that it was holding for the Donbass operation and brought them in. But the people say, well, that's a victory. Well, it's not, because the Ukrainian, as Abdi said, one of his last things he said, I, being Opti, have said that always that the war will end this year, that the Ukrainian army can't do it. But he said, I always had to think and say, well, gosh, but what about those reserves? What about all those M1 tanks? What about all those Leopard tanks that we haven't destroyed yet? They're still out there. And how do we get to them? He said the Ukrainians just solved the problem for us. They brought them to us. And he says, so you just made our victory absolutely certain, because now, in addition to destroying you down there, we've destroyed your strategic reserve and you've got nothing left. You've got nothing left. So whatever diversion of forces that the Ukrainians thought was going to take place that would change, the momentum on the battlefield, that didn't work. Worse, the forces that were brought together have solved a big problem for the Russians: how to close with and destroy Ukraine's strategic reserves, which they're now doing in Kursk. So this just, I think, has hastened the defeat of the Ukrainian military, and with it, I think, for the first time, you're starting to hear, real talk in the West about how Zelensky's time's up, that he's no longer trusted as a leader, too corrupt, too inefficient. It's time to replace him, and there's active discussion apparently to do just that. You've seen a change in the tenor. I mean, Putin has said no more negotiation. If you remember back in the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, Putin said that he has a peace proposal on the table. It's a modification of the Istanbul Communique, updated to take into account the reality that the new territories are Russia and will forever be Russia. But other than that, Russia's willing to do everything they talked about in the Istanbul Communique. But he said this isn't going to be on the table forever. And when we take it off, it's never going back on. And then the only discussion will be is terms of unconditional surrender. And that's where we're at right now. Ukraine thinks they're doing all this so they can improve their negotiating position. They don't have a negotiating position. They have just sealed their death warrant. It's over. They just don't know it yet. But the other thing is, they may have cost themselves another 20-30% of their country. Dmitry Medvedev, who has a reputation of being the bad cop to Putin's good cop, irrationality to rationality, but whose voice can't be ignored, has come out and said that because Ukraine went into Kursk, they're going to lose Sumy, they're going to lose Kharkov, they're going to lose Dnipropetrovsk, they're going to lose Mykolaiv, and they're going to lose Odessa. And it ain't ever coming back. Again, Ukraine dug their own grave. There are huge consequences for what just happened. Huge consequences. One of them may be the pending destruction of the Ukrainian governmental center in Kiev. This Russian senator that I interviewed recently said that there will be a Russian retaliation. It will use weapons that have not been used to date, horrible weapons, terrible weapons. I don't think he's talking nuclear. I think he's talking something else. But he said when we use them, it will send a shiver of fear down the spine of everybody in the West because you can't imagine what's about to happen. And these weapons can be used against you. And he hinted, I don't want to put words in his mouth. There'd be a lot of speculation on my part, but I hope he's wrong, because if he's right, it's not going to be a good day for the Ukrainians. But they brought it on themselves. They really have. And I know people out there take umbrage. Scott, they are allowed to defend themselves. You forget they aren't allowed to defend themselves because they are criminals. They are Nazis. They were installed through an illegal coup promulgated by the CIA, and that from 2015 up until 2022, NATO was training the Ukrainian army for the singular purpose of killing Russians in the Donbass. NATO slides brag about it. Every 55 days, we train 500 Ukrainians here so they can go here and kill Russians there. We bragged about it. So don't tell me about Ukraine's inherent right of self-defense. If they wanted self-defense, they wouldn't have attacked the Russian people of the Donbass. They wouldn't have carried out the rape of Mariupol. No, Ukraine brought this on themselves, but Russia was willing to limit the consequences of this criminal action to, neutrality, getting rid of NATO out of the soil, and minimizing the Banderist ideology, but leaving Ukraine relatively intact. In fact, if the 1 April Istanbul communique had been implemented, Kherson and Zaporizhia would be Ukrainian. Russia wasn't going to take them, had no intention of keeping them, but only when Ukraine took in the $48 billion of U.S. military aid and began, launching attacks that showed they had no intention of pursuing peace, did Russia say, well, then you have forfeited your right to govern over the ethnic Russian peoples of Kherson, Zaporizhia, and the Donbass. A referendum was held, and they've now become a permanent part of the Russian Federation.
Yeah, and earlier you're speaking about lies and lies and lies. I mean, one of the biggest arguments right now that everybody in the political establishment in the West, whether it's media or within the political class, Biden, you have the poodles like Estonia's government, all the representatives of the NATO axis, they are all saying, and the Western media is also saying, that Kursk and what Ukraine is doing and what NATO is doing is entirely legal, that this is entirely within the bounds of what Ukraine is allowed to do, given that, and this is a narrative that we've been pushing back on since the beginning, Russia is in a war of conquest in Ukraine. I mean, Scott, perhaps correct the record there. War of conquest, they're calling what Russia is doing. Meanwhile, Ukraine is literally, and NATO is literally talking about usurping Russian territory to leverage in negotiations.
Again, I think the Ukrainians have to reflect on the reality of history, and the West needs to reflect on it as well. Up until January 2014, Russia had no territorial ambition whatsoever for any part of Ukraine. Russia recognized the 1991 borders, even though Russia was pained by Crimea, which is dominated by ethnic Russians, has always considered itself to be part of Russia, even though that was now part of this Ukrainian state that was cobbled together during Soviet times and gained its independence in 1991. Russia was respecting that. Only after the illegal CIA brokered coup d'etat in February of 2014, when the rabid right-wing neo-Nazis, the Stepan Banderas supporters who've been funded by the CIA for over, gosh, 1948, 88, 40, I mean, close to 50 years. No, more than that, 70 years. The the CIA-backed ultra nationalists made a move on Crimea to go in there. They were on buses, they were on trains, and the Crimean Russians rose up, and the Russian government came to their assistance with the little green men. And next thing you know, Crimea is Russian. And Russia said, you don't get to come in here with your Ukrainian ultranationalism and vandalize and brutalize Russian citizens. But after that, Russia, the Donbass exploded. Russia didn't run in and say, "Oh, we're going to make this, part of Russia too." Russia actually turned down the expressed desire of the Russian people of Donbass, who said, "We want to be part of Russia." Russia said, "No, you're Ukraine. We'll defend your rights, but we're not going to support, you being separated from Ukraine." The Minsk agreements were designed to achieve, the rights of the Russian people without sacrificing sovereign control over this territory by Ukraine. But Ukraine and NATO and the collective West had no intention. We now know Angela Merkel, Francois Hollande both said that the Minsk Accords were a sham designed to buy time so that NATO could train a Ukrainian army to solve the Donbass problem through force of arms. It was a sham. It's not Russia that was looking for war. It was NATO and Ukraine. It was NATO looking for war using Ukraine as a proxy. In 2008, William Burns, the ambassador of the United States to Russia, warned about this in a memorandum back to the State Department called "Niet means niet, no means no." He said it's a red line. NATO joining, Ukraine joining NATO is a red line. And if we push this, we being the United States and the West, it will lead to Russia having to send in military forces, meaning a war, and it will result in the loss of Crimea and the Donbass. I mean, it's 2008. Burns was 100% correct. Today, he's a director of the CIA. Hopefully, he has the same level of cognitive capability in that role as well. But, NATO picked this fight. Russia didn't pick this fight. But when it became clear that Ukraine was intent on using military force to resolve the Donbass problem, Russia intervened. And when it was clear that NATO had no intention of allowing Ukraine to make peace with Russia after the initiation of the special military operation, Russia said that these Russian peoples, these new territories of Novaya Russia, will become part of Russia. And they had a referendum. But it's all of this has a cause-effect relationship, whereas Russia is reacting to the proactive violence carried out by NATO and their Ukrainian proxies. The territorial acquisition that took place wasn't because Russia initiated action to do this. It was because Russia was compelled to do something in response to the irresponsible behaviors of the collective West and their Ukrainian proxies. And today, if Dmitry Medvedev's words are borne out, Ukraine will lose more territories, not because Russia wanted to take them. Vladimir Putin just put a peace treaty on the table that would have prevented this from happening. But it was Ukraine that opted out. It was Ukraine that agreed to be used as a proxy force of NATO to invade Russia. And now Ukraine's going to pay the price.
And maybe lastly on this, Scott, as you have talked about, Putin, the Russian government, Russia, they're saying peace is off the table. They had a proposal. Given what's happened with Kursk, that's just complete. That's crossed the red line. Another red line. That's over. Now, what's so interesting about what's been going on, Scott, on the front lines, despite the grim situation for Ukraine, it feels like the United States, it feels like NATO is doing everything possible to not just prevent any kind of settlement to the conflict politically and militarily, but also to push the question that you're so interested in and do so much hard work on, push this conflict into a potentially nuclear situation. I mean, the things I'm hearing about, not only Zaporizhia power plant attacked, but also the Kursk power plant being attacked. Of course, we don't have all the details about what's been happening, but that's there's a big danger here. And when I hear Biden and I hear Josep Borrell, when I hear these people, they're so Lindsey Graham, we've brought him up here before. This is bold and beautiful, according to Lindsey Graham. Your final reaction.
I mean, I don't know how disconnected from reality you have to be to speak of bold and beautiful. Look, I'm a military guy. I recognize that there are circumstances in modern life around the world where the use of military force is a tragic necessity. There's evil out there. There are bad people out there, people who seek to do harm to good people. And sometimes the armed forces are necessary to defend oneself against that. Um, but having experienced war, and again, I want to make everybody understand I'm no war hero, I'm no special forces gunman, I'm no frontline infantryman. I was an intelligence officer, but I was an intelligence officer that leaned way forward. So I've experienced war. I've seen it firsthand, and I hate it with every fiber of my being. Um, and I believe that we have a duty and responsibility as warriors to ensure that before we send young men and women off to fight and die for a cause, that we make sure that that cause is worthy of the sacrifice we're asking them to make, and that we have exhausted all means possible short of war to prevent war, to solve this problem, in another way. So when I see somebody like Lindsey Graham just up there, I mean, literally foaming at the mouth, promoting war, promoting war, promoting war, he sickens me. And Tom Cotton sickens me. All the warmongers out there sicken me. Um, war is not a beautiful thing. War is an ugly thing. War has devastated Ukraine. War has devastated the Russian people. I mean, they too have suffered losses. There are Russian mothers who will never see their sons again. There are Russian wives who have to raise a family on their own because the husbands are dead. Um, you know, Russian sisters don't have brothers. Uncles don't have nephews. it's This is a tragedy. This is a human tragedy. Hundreds of thousands of dead Ukrainians, tens of thousands, if not 100,000 dead Russians, the wounded, and then just the psychological damage that's done to human beings when called upon to kill other human beings. It's not natural. It's not natural to kill people, and when you do it, and when you see it, when you experience it, it never leaves you. It's stuck in your head. And fortunately, most people are able to compartmentalize it and say, okay, that's rattling around in there, but I'm gonna do my best to keep on going. But some people can't, and it changes them. If you go to war, you're broken forever. Some people are broken a little bit, some people are broken totally, but you're broken, and we need to understand that all these nice, healthy young men and women who could be such an important part of our society, when we send them to war, they break. When they come back, they're broken, and then it's society's obligation to fix them. But we can't fix them. You can't. All you could do is bind their wounds and hope that the scars aren't too deep, aren't too crippling. Um, but it just bothers me when I see people out there promoting the continuation of this conflict, the expansion of this conflict, as if this is a good thing. It's not a good thing. This war should never have been fought. The Russians put a peace proposal on the table in December of 2021. a draft peace treaty or draft treaty with NATO and a draft treaty with the United States to talk about how to reimagine European security framework so that the national security interests of Russia were respected along with the national security interests of NATO and the collective West. It was supposed to be a negotiation. The West said no. See, the West only dictates outcomes. They never negotiate solutions. There is no such thing as diplomacy in the West. Diplomacy consists of a diplomat backed by a general demanding my way or the highway. But Russia sought peace. And even when Russia initiated the special military operation, it was designed, frankly speaking, to get the Ukrainians to the negotiating table as quickly as possible. In less than 6 days after the initiation of the special military operation, Ukraine was at the negotiating table in Gomel. 3 rounds of discussions there. Then they moved to Turkey. And by the end of March, that is, ladies and gentlemen, a little more than a month after the war started, they had a peace proposal. And had Ukraine accepted that peace proposal, 500,000 plus Ukrainian men would be alive today. Tens of millions of Ukrainians who were displaced from their homes would be in their homes. Children would be at school. Women would be caring for these children. Factories would be up and running. The Ukrainian economy would be thriving, and the Russians too wouldn't be bearing the cost of war. But no, people like Lindsey Graham opted to go to war. Now, Lindsey Graham's a little perfumed princess who, yes, I know he was a colonel in the Air Force. He was a judge advocate. He's never seen combat, never been close to combat, doesn't know what combat is. But he's out there, foaming at the mouth as if he is the modern day incarnation of Attila the Hun. I would encourage Lindsey Graham to get into a striker and maybe go tour the Kursk battlefield, the one that he applauds so much. Spent a lot of time running around there. And maybe he'll never come back because everybody goes to Kursk, entering Kursk from the Ukrainian side. They don't, they're not coming back. But he doesn't have the courage to do that. He doesn't have the intestinal fortitude. And most of the people out there cheerleading for war don't have it either. They're not willing to do what it takes to put their money where their mouth, to say, I'm not a hypocrite. I'll do what I ask other people to do. But we have a generation of people also that the American public, we're conditioned by 2+ generations of low intensity conflict. For us, war, a bad day at war is 13 guys going down in a helicopter. Oh my God, that's sad. Now it is. I'm not minimizing that. It's sad. Especially for the families, for their colleagues and stuff. But a bad day in war is, your brigade, 5,000 men suffering 60% losses. That's modern war. That's what's happening right now in Ukraine. General Christopher Cavoli, who's the commander of American ground forces in Europe, commander of NATO ground forces, said back in 2023, early 2023, that NATO couldn't imagine the scope of violence that's taking place, the destruction that's taking place in this battle. What that means when you say can't imagine, it means we don't have plans in place to deal with modern warfare because we didn't imagine. A plan is what you've imagined is going to happen and how you're going to deal with what you've imagined. But if you're thinking that when you go to war, that your casualty, your attrition rate will be 3% a day. So you build your logistical sustainability plan on that attrition rate, when reality is your attrition rate may be 60% a day. And now you don't have sustainability. It means NATO can't go to war. NATO can't do this kind of combat. That's the reality. Our military is not ready to fight this kind of fight, but perhaps even more important, the American people aren't ready for this. Are we ready for 5,000 body bags a day? I don't think we are. But that's what's going to happen if we go to war in Ukraine. Full-scale war against the Russians. It's going to slaughter us. And I don't think the people understand this. We watch too many movies. We watch, American Sniper. See, we can kill everybody. We watch, all these, Black Hawk Down, all these low intensity conflict things. You go watch Saving Private Ryan. Look at the assault on Omaha Beach and the number of American dead there. You're going to get a slight idea of what's going to happen if we go to war on the ground in Europe against the Russian military. We should be pursuing peace. This is what I've been advocating. Um, you know, nonviolent solutions to difficult problems. The internet, it can be very difficult. I'm not saying that diplomacy is easy. It can be extraordinarily difficult, frustratingly so. But I think society's better off when a bunch of old men and old women are sitting in a room yakking. We could yak all night. Go to sleep, wake up in the morning and yak. You know what's happening when we yak? Nothing. It's wonderful. But when we stop yakking and we start banging, now we got dead bodies. I think we're better off expending hot air than we are expending blood. And I think we should put a lot more time and resources into the expenditure of hot air and far fewer resources into the expenditure of blood. I think the world would be a safer place and a better place if that was where our priorities were.
Yeah, always get a kick out of those who get so angry, especially in the West, especially in our country, Scott. They get so mad at Russia, China, Iran. They talk too much. They talk too much. It's like, well, they're trying to build a diplomatic solution. They're trying to build upon international law and follow international law. They're trying to do that thing that isn't murdering a bunch of people and destabilizing the world. But Scott, we would be remiss to not comment on the Middle East, at least for the last minutes that we have here. And then for everyone who left a super chat, we will not be able to take questions because I do have a hard stop, and I know, Scott, you have time that needs to be respected. But let us just close on the situation that's happening in the Middle East. So there's something I perhaps we can focus on, because a lot of people have been getting hung up on, when is Iran going to attack? When is Hezbollah? When is the Axis of Resistance? When are they going to just let it all rain down on Israel? I think the real question is, though, Scott, is where are things at right now for Israel? Because the reports are pretty damning. The Western media, even, you have CNN, you have New York Times, they're all coming out and talking about this is the end of the line for Israel. Its operation, also known as the genocide for many people, has reached its limits. Hamas, the resistance, they're still very much in play. And we do have this long war now that Israel has entered with the Axis of Resistance. Regardless of whatever Iran does, whatever Hezbollah does, it's a long war that's not going to end. Israel has crossed the line. So, Scott, how did we get here, and what is the reality? Because I think we are getting caught up in a lot of for very good reason, a lot of the bluster of the moment. But what is the reality of this situation for Israel and, of course, for the region as a whole?
Well, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Israel's not winning. You know, they're in fact, I personally believe that Israel's been fatally injured by this. That the damage that's been done to Israel's reputation by their genocidal behavior towards the people of Gaza is irreversible. That Israel will never recover from this, nor should it, to be honest. A lot of this damage is, of course, in terms of the public relations aspect, but there's a legal aspect of that too, because the International Court of Justice has literally defined Israel as an apartheid state. That's a big deal. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for the Prime Minister of Israel, the military chief of staff, and other individuals for the crime of genocide. This is a big deal. You don't walk these findings back; they don't disappear. You don't get to erase that ledger. The other issue is economic. The economic damage. I mean, we talk about Hezbollah, we talk about Iran, talk about Hamas. Let's talk about the Houthi. They've carried out one of the most successful um, naval blockades in history, uh, and they don't have a navy, at least not one of any note. But what they do have is ballistic missiles and drones and cruise missiles um, that are used to target shipping that's seeking to transit the Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb, Gulf of Aden. Maybe that's the other way around. Get up to the Suez Canal or get to the southern port of Eilat. And they've shut it down. The Israelis have had to close the southern port of Eilat. They're going bankrupt. They're suffering billions of dollars of damage. This translates into poor industrial performance, loss of jobs. Now we couple onto that the fact that Hezbollah has pretty much caused Israel to depopulate much of the north of Galilee. People had to flee their towns and villages and seek refuge elsewhere. This is on top of the tens of thousands that had to flee around Gaza. So you have a significant number of homeless in Israel who aren't working because their jobs are shut down, and Israel has to sustain this. Israel's collapsing economically. Before the October 7th, raid by Hamas on Israel, Israel was deeply divided over the issue of Benjamin Netanyahu's effort to transform the Israeli judicial system in a manner that would make it impossible to indict him for very serious charges of corruption. This got to the point where Israeli society was divided to such an extent that the president of Israel warned, literally in the weeks leading up to October 7th, that Israel is dangerously close to a real civil war, to breaking down, that to have Israelis fighting Israelis. That problem hasn't gone away. It's still there. But the main thing is that the world now believes strongly that there must be a Palestinian state. Israel had done its best in suppressing that and trying to create the conditions that would never allow a Palestinian state to reach fruition. And there were many Gulf Arab states that were going along with this, Saudi Arabia, etc., who were looking for improved relations, normalized relations with Israel. But today, that's it. Israel has lost this fight. The world is committed to the creation of a Palestinian state. Right now, they're talking about a two-state solution, but here's the thing. In order to get that two-state solution, Israel will have to commit to reversing most, if not all, of the settlements on the West Bank. And this will result in the violent objection on the part of Israeli settlers. I call them the Brooklyn Jews who come from America because they know they can get away literally with theft and murder of Palestinian land and Palestinian people. They will rise up. There will be a significant level of civil unrest resulting from this. That we part and parcel of the overall deterioration of Israel as a nation state. Millions of Israelis hold dual citizenship. We already see hundreds of thousands of Israelis fleeing Israel because it's just not a good place to live right now. But what happens when millions leave? What happens when the indigenous Jewish population of the Levant drops from 9 million to 5 million, drops from 5 million to 3 million? Meanwhile, the population of the camera just went out of focus there. I don't know if that's me getting drunk or my camera getting drunk, but
it looks like it's getting you out of focus for some reason.
There we go.
There you go.
Oh my God. Keep it out of focus, Ritter. It was better blurry. So, but the point is that I lost my train of thought, but that we'll just leave it at that because I don't know where I was.
Well,
See you, Muslim Willie, and that's the whole reason for why I do this analysis for you too. And by the way, second thing I want to share with you, in addition to what YouTube just did this morning, is that the this individual here, I'm sure you know who that is, but nonetheless, I don't want to assume you guys know who this is. Can you type in the chat box, please? Yeah. Once again, I'm not insulting your intelligence, guys. It just, I don't assume. I don't like to assume. So if you can type in quickly here who this gentleman is. YT, you got it. Shino Tong, you got it. Sam Karina, you got it. Hairless Ape, you got it. That's Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo. I'm not Shinzo Abe. Shinzo Abe was assassinated. Fumio Kishida. That's what it is. So what's important about it is that he just announced his resignation. So he's gonna resign, I think, starting in September, if I'm not mistaken. Surprise that he said he will not run for the upcoming. So I think September. But that's beside the point. What's important about it is why. Why at this time? And to me, as an analyst, I'm thinking there's only one explanation. He's been dragging his country in a wrong direction on behalf of the US. And now it's getting pushed back domestically. So basically what he wants to do is he wants to save his skin, not some sort of encounter or experience the same fate as Shinzo Abe. You don't know what happened to Shinzo Abe. He was assassinated. So that's, to me, where I see it going, because the policies he embarked on were in the wrong direction, taking Japan in the wrong direction more than it already is. So, and that's probably why he is stepping down or forced to step down. So they will never disclose that anyway. All right, let's get into our topic here. I'm going to be providing you analysis about what is the significance of this. As a matter of fact, I have the questions for you. I prepared them right here, guys. The questions we need to ask is, first of all, why is China declaring its support publicly? You know, China does things quietly sometimes. And for something like this, you know, they could have stayed quiet about it. Beijing could have stayed quiet. Who's going to know? You know, but that's not how it works, you know. And this is why we need to ask a question. Why now? Second question is, what message is China sending? And if it is a message, to whom? We all know. So third question is, what is China's strategic calculations? China is not doing this in a vacuum. There is a strategic calculations from two angles. One is economic, and the other one is geopolitical. And I'm going to tackle those two aspects of it. And the fourth question, which to me, again, thinking outside the box, the possibility is there. Could the conflict in Gaza will lead China, Russia, and Iran into a formal, that's the key word, formal military alliance? Again, when I share with you what I wrote in my Iran book about China and Iran, it will make you think in those terms. And those are the aspects that I'm going to be addressing. Then I have a question for you. I can either ask you here later on or put it in the community. Hopefully YouTube will not take it down. So let's hope. Anyway, all right. I had a chance, as I mentioned, to read an article. I do read a lot before I'll come on the air and share my knowledge with you and reaction to articles and my analysis, most of it all. Had a chance to read an article by Ethan Wang and Kevin Krolicki. I hope I pronounce it correctly. So, yeah, the article was sort of spot on as far as the framework of what an article had to be. However, it didn't go into the depth of really what's behind all this behind the scenes. And then it's understandably so. Those are authors of the article. They are not an analyst. They are sort of journalists, if I may use the term. And there is quite a difference there. So, but here's the thing. China's support, and this is the word from Mr. Wang Yi, Chinese foreign minister. I have a picture of him, by the way. Very, very, very smart individual, well spoken. You know, I listen to him a lot with the translation and so forth. So I consider him statement. You know, if I have a wish, is to interview him one day. So that's just a wish. So what he said was, he said, and I quote, China supports Iran. And listen carefully, guys, because those words are measured. China supports Iran in defending its sovereignty, security, and national dignity in accordance with the law and in its efforts to maintain regional peace and stability, and stand ready to maintain close communication with Iran. End of quote. Well measured with a loud and vociferously loud message to the West, to the US mainly. It's not to Israel, because there's nothing. There is some coordination between Israel and China as far as economics. That's usually, I'm aware of that one, but this is on a different level altogether. So, and this is why we have to think about it in terms of why now? Why will China announce this publicly now? Why did he announce it, let's say, 4 months ago? Why did he announce it when the consulate of Iran in Damascus was hit? Even though China made an announcement, but not on the same weight as this one here. Once again, I'm going to read the statements from Mr. Wang Yi. China, I quote, China supports Iran in defending its sovereignty, security, and a national dignity in accordance with the law, and in its efforts to maintain regional peace and stability, and stand ready to maintain close communication with Iran. End of quote. So, putting my geopolitical hat on, when I read the last part, to maintain close communication, it tells me the message right there that China is going to step forward in supporting Iran. How? We don't know yet. That's the whole key to all these dynamics that now all of a sudden China is stating this. Well, of course, you all know how this all came about, because it was the Chinese Foreign Ministry through Mr. Wang Yi, which repeated Beijing denunciations of the assassination of Hamas leader, or chief political leader rather, Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran on July 31st. You know, and even the Chinese Foreign Ministry went as far as saying that the strike itself has violated Iran's sovereignty and threatened the regional stability because it happened on Iranian territory. So that is what's important about all this one here. So now we need to understand how all this happening within a certain context. Well, one of them has to do with, and I have a clip for you I'm going to share with you shortly here. As I said, have to understand within the sphere of Iran's historical and contentious announcements, that is. Why? It's because Iran has been able to achieve certain advancements in weaponry. Those are domestically indigenous production, that is. So, and all this has to do with this particular, and I'm going to show you an image here. And I'll detail later on for you the announcement about it and all that stuff. What are you looking at? You're looking at Fatah. Fatah, the Arabic term for it, or Fatah. Fatah is a nuclear submarine. These are small size submarines. But the fact that Iran developed a nuclear submarine, it changes the calculations for all parties involved. And I will get into all this. But first, let's listen to this particular clip here. And we just go from there. Share screen. And it's going to be just very, very short. And I got it through another video when I found it last time. Oh. All right, where is it? Yeah, it's right here. Bear with me, guys. 47. Okay. All right, guys. Share screen. And please give me a thumbs up if you can hear.
Of Iran's nuclear-powered submarine, which has been named the Fateh class SSN, marks a significant development in the nation's military capabilities. This new addition to the Iranian Navy is touted as a game changer, capable of operating silently and for extended periods underwater, making it a formidable weapon in the nation's arsenal. One of the key advantages of a nuclear-powered submarine is its virtually unlimited range, allowing it to traverse oceans and remain submerged for months at a time without refueling. This strategic capability poses a direct challenge to the maritime interests of the United States, as well as those.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight this first. Well, there's major, we're talking about some strategic calculations now in the region. Why? It's because the announcement by Iran till this time, for it to be announcing about a nuclear submarine, it doesn't matter its size. What it does matter is what the impact is going to be. And it's going to be armed, that sub is going to be armed with certain type of missiles that can take down an aircraft carrier. That is the major announcements that Iran did. And this is why this sort of, I use the term surprising announcement. I mean, I didn't hear about it before. The Iranians stayed quiet about it. And this is why, guys, we need to understand one key. There's always a strategic calculation before you embark on any act.
You know, I've been saying this in military, people who do military analysis, things of that nature have been saying, an aircraft carrier is a thing of the past. You no longer will be able to just park your aircraft carrier off the shores of Iran like they did Libya. You can't do that anymore. You definitely won't be able to do it to no opponent. You can't even do it to Venezuela. They will sink those. Iran definitely will sink them. So what's the problem is they just putting all of our sailors in jeopardy because they know used to when you're fighting an opponent like Iran or China or Russia. Come on, them just floating coffins.
Be it in this case, Iran retaliating against or attacking Israel, being about announcements like this, there's always a strategic calculations for this. So for us, we tend to want to see things happen quickly. It doesn't work this way when it comes down to geopolitics, because there are so many moving parts and calculations that any country will have to take into consideration. Take the example of China. Why will China announce its support publicly for both the sovereignty and the security of Iran today, but not 4 months ago? It's all about the calculation, the strategic aspects of it. And with the Iran's announcements about these nuclear submarines, what you're looking at now is that the balance of power in West Asia or Middle East, that is now going to be shifting beyond the U.S. control. Well, the U.S. doesn't have any control anymore because our influence in the region is waning down. And this is why you are hearing from some Arab countries saying to the U.S., you will not launch any attack against Iran from our territory. But of course, you can't trust those Arab countries anyway. You know, they'll tell you one thing and stab you in the back. We're talking about the leaders, not the people. So, and this is where now you're going to be thinking about the naval warfare, how it's going to be, and place it within China's announcement. Well, if you know anything about China's naval capability, it begs the question, how will China intend to support the sovereignty and security of Iran? Those to me are very, very, very interesting aspects of it. And I need to share something with you also about the, let me share a picture about this nuclear sub, then I'll detail some other stuff later on. The Fatah or Fatah, the nuclear sub, you know, now there are those that argue that, well, this is small, whatever. Yes, it is. It is. Nobody's denying this. However, as small as it might be, it still can pose a serious threat in close quarters. This is exactly the purpose of why Iran established this type of submarines. Let alone if it is a nuclear powered, that means it can submerge for a long period of time. And just think of this, guys. Just think of this possibility. You all know China developed some very advanced sonars when it comes down to detecting the presence of submarines and so forth. Can you imagine if China provided Iran with this technology? I don't see it happening now because this is new for China. Why China will turn around and give it to Iran? It doesn't work that way. But it's just hypothetical, sort of indulge me for a second here. How do you think it's going to change the calculations? Despite now we are sort of sending our Georgia class, nuclear class submarine, it's just posturing, no more, no less. I mean, we couldn't even defeat those in Afghanistan. It's not a laughing matter. We couldn't beat those ones in Afghanistan without saying the names here. What makes us think that we're going to sort of try to intimidate? Because that's what it is. Nothing but intimidation. Ain't not going to work. Ain't going to work. So, and this is where I'm arguing with the Chinese advancements in the sonar system. Just imagine the combination of this. Now there is one key aspect that I need you to know. Because one thing is for sure is that Iran's naval capabilities are growing. Iran does have a substantial navy or naval assets that they can deploy. So, and this is why in the Strait of Hormuz, when I wish I had a map for it, the Strait. Let me see if I have one old picture. I don't know if this will show it. No, that's not the right one. Yeah, we want to say I didn't. I'm sorry, I forgot to have that one. But if you think about the very tiny Strait of Hormuz, how tiny that is, the idea of how Iran has already placed underwater sort of type of weapons. All I know personally is that they have the capability of this sinking whatever vessels or big ship and so forth, a military one that is. So that tells me those are very, very powerful type of weapons. You can fill in the blank here. I know YouTube doesn't like this word. So, and this is where the issue, not the issue rather, but where I see the challenge that's going to come forward. Because when you think about this particular sub right here, let me put it back again, right there. When you think about this again, this is only about 150 meter long. So, and put about based on the specs that I read, and I will provide you the link, guys, to all this, about around 600 tons. That's how much it weighs. So, but to Iran is considered one of the biggest, but in comparison to what we have, for example, no, it's very, very small. But nonetheless, it's not about that. It's about the impact it could have. Because when you think about this type of submarines, the little that I know about submarine technology, whatever, that this one, this particular one lacks the vertical launch tubes in it because it's very small. That's all it's made for. It's nothing substantive that is going to be moving forward with that. Now, the only thing that I have read somewhere is that why does Iran use diesel electric submarines instead of nuclears? So this is in contrast to the U.S. Navy nuclear submarines, because most of ours, the offensive ones, those are nuclear. Here is the thing. The diesel submarines, based on my little research that I did on this, have limited range. This is why they developed this nuclear submarine, because it can stay submerged for a long period of time. So, and they are virtually undetectable. So unless they are moving, this is where the distinction between the two. If they are moving, unless you have an advanced radar system, you won't, a sonar rather, you won't be able to detect it. And that's exactly what China developed. So, and one thing that I want to share with you also, one of those announcements that I told you I'm going to keep till we have the live, is that Iran now is in the process. Yes, and I checked on this. It is in process of developing atomic submarines. The dynamics have changed. And that's, once again, when I put the statements of China as far as backing Iran on both sovereignty and security, that tells me, personally, that tells me Iran can count on China's commitment or support. Second, China realized that communication with Iran, China was informed that Iran has developed some types of weapons that can repel or challenge the US. That's the only way I see it. So as to the atomic submarines, it's going to take time, but it will happen. So now this leads me to talk about the US nukes now. We are sending, deployed the Georgia, actually the Ohio class. There is an entire class of this. And so the Secretary of Defense, Austin, sort of issued the order for the deployments, excuse me, of guided missile submarines to the region. It's posturing. That's, in my opinion, how it is. Yes, of course, he has to say this is for the defense of Israel. No. And this is what I'm saying. You have to think about this from the bigger picture. And this is one of the things Iran is thinking about as I speak right now. What are the strategic calculations when we launch the attack, if Iran launches, or when, not if, when Iran launches the attack on Israel? We already started to see that both the Hezbollah and the Qassam, or Hamas, that is, have already launched two missiles rather, in Tel Aviv. I have a picture of those ones here, and it was confirmed because I checked. So I will not say something if I can't confirm it. So, and this is why, one of the reasons why the US decided to send all this one here. And why? Because the US understand that Israel won't be able to handle this on its own. It can't. It does not have the capabilities to do so. Doesn't have the assets needed to do so. So what's going to happen is the US will have to come to its support. It's back to the question of what is our interest into all this. Well, of course, you know what our interest is. Fomenting more tensions in the region is because we don't want the rapprochement or the close partnership between Iran, Russia, and China. That is one of the whole aspects of it. So the Georgia class, which is a nuclear power submarine, was already in the Mediterranean, and from the Mediterranean was dispatched to head out to the region. So, and the idea of, let me see something here because I need to make sure you have the full picture of all this one here. The Georgia class, that is the picture you are, if there is a picture there. I didn't put it right here. This one here, guys. This is Georgia class. But Georgia, they are sort of falls under the nuclear-powered Ohio class Navy submarines. So, and all this one, again, when an aircraft carrier moves, the submarine will have to move with it as well to maintain reconnaissance, to maintain sort of espionage and so forth. That's just part of the platform we tend to use, but also is for posturing when you see. But again, Iranians not going to be intimidated by this. I guarantee you that. It's because we don't know what other capabilities Iran has, let alone that Russia has deployed already, or sent rather, some advanced systems to Iran. I got a picture of this Iran marshes here. Very, very interesting, sophisticated one that's been deployed. And this one was displayed in Moscow, by the way. So all this falls within the argument that for Iran to be thinking in terms of, for the US rather, to be thinking, well, we're going to send our aircraft carrier and intimidate them. No, it's not going to work. That era is gone. And this is why it gives me sort of confidence in what I'm saying. And again, it's my own statement, my own opinion. For China to come forward and announce this, there has to be something tangible as far as Iran communicating with China that we have XYZ. Therefore, China saying, yes, we feel comfortable enough to move forward. But also China has its own strategic calculations, and rightly so. And this is one of the key that I need you to understand, guys. Even for Russia, that end up sending its own weapons to Iran, I came across some information that suggests, which was, I think, they got declassified by the Russians. Why now? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. All I know is that for Russia, some of its plans, part of the training they conducted way back, and they stayed mum about it, is that it trained on the capability of striking UK, Britain cities with a nuclear missile. That's how, sort of, when I read the declassified one, it demonstrated that one. That's to me was the very, 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 because what the Russian did is they prepared the list. We do the same. We did the same. The last time it was an issue with Iran, the Pentagon had to sort of put the list together as to what the targets are. And the first one on the menu, we call it the menu, at the top was carpet bombing. Now, was a tactical nuclear part of that calculations? Yes, it was. That was back then. Of course, that after that, it was shelved. That plan was shelved and didn't. Now, the ones that I came across, and I will provide you the link so you can take a look for yourself, is that this particular, as declassified documents, sort of the Russians looking at it in terms of a preemptive, because we all know what the UK now is saying, right? Regarding the Ukraine aspects, or even attacking Russia for that matter. So to Iran and China, the calculations are different, very, very, very different, because you're going to have to think about the economic aspects of it, and of course geopolitics. This is a picture of President Xi with the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. This is an old picture, by the way, guys. It's not recent. It's an old picture. I just found one and put that in. So when we think in terms of the idea of why all of a sudden China will end up publicly announcing this, it's because it is committed to now ensuring that there's stability in the region. Because remember, China has been working hard behind closed doors for that agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So why should all its hard work be wasted? They're going to have to do whatever needs to be done to ensure that their interests are protected, meaning China in this case. And this is where my own analysis that I disclosed in my Iran book, which, by the way, I just uploaded for those who might be interested in buying a copy of it. It's like $15 or whatever. You'll find it very, very interesting because it's relevant to what's going on right now. And this is what I'm going to be sharing with you, some of excerpts from it, to highlight to you what I exactly argued back then that is reflective of today. And even back then, I was always saying, consider the developments in the region, okay? And we should also emphasize the role of other major powers, the likes of China and the likes of Russia. That's going to be playing a role in the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East, as I argued back then. And here we are. So, and like I said last time in this analysis or research, I said I focus my arguments on how Iran new status helps China and Iran China and Russia to further advance their corporate interests and also challenge the declining regional leadership of the United States, because it was declining from back then. So, and I keep returning to the question, really, whether, and here is the key to why I am convinced that China's announcements of backing Iran didn't happen in a vacuum. Like I argued back then, I said I keep returning to this question, whether these interests, mainly on part of China, will divert United States focus away from the Pacific region, given what was going on over in that part of the world. So the answer to this, we all know that the next theater is going to be South China Sea. There is no ifs and buts. We know where things are headed. And this is why China is moving forward ahead of it, which is a smart move. Because to China, they rather deal with this from far away than be in the South China Sea for the US to be there. Of course, we all know what just happened with Australia and the signing of the AUKUS, another agreement pertaining to AUKUS and so, which is a mess anyway. That's a conversation for another day. So to me personally, the answer to this kind of argument will shed light for us in terms of the China's long-term strategy that it's pursuing. This is one of them. Agreeing to back Iran, it's one of the strategic steps. And as I argued back then, for now, suffice it to say that China and Russia's interest in the region will grow stronger, bolder, and more calculating. That's what I argued back some 4 years ago, or 5, whatever that was. Still apply today. And signaling, in my opinion, for a far more assertive foreign policy from both countries in the coming years. Now, when we say assertive, don't take it in a negative way. Sometimes when you say assertive, yes, it can go into that direction. But usually it's only going in the wrong direction or in a negative connotation to it if it is a provocation. China's assertive policy, it's not a provocation in this case. It's about protecting its own strategic interests, and rightly so. And like I argued back then, regarding China, observers have noticed in recent years the increased economic, military, and political footprints in the region, West Asia or Middle East, that is. So, and this pursuit, as I argued, stems from two main things, in my opinion. One is China's need for access to energy sources, mainly in Saudi Arabia and Iran, given their proximity, given its proximity rather to the Caspian Sea. And number two is that the Caspian Sea and Turkey, of course, on that end. And number two is that China's economic involvement in the region facilitate expansion of its political sphere of influence. This is, guys, why am I sharing this with you? Is to highlight to you the changes within the geopolitical landscape. That shift from a unipolar to a multipolar is now displayed before us to see how major powers like China intends to play its role in it. Because for the US, it's done for. It becomes now the question that I am asking is what kind of role China is going to play in this 21st century in the new geopolitical landscape. And it's a fair question. So, because here is the thing about all China's moves that did back then, and I connected to China's recent statements, all this, for me personally, it tells me one particular aspect, and is that China's projecting to the region, and the world for that matter, the perception of its ability to, one, challenge American leadership in the region, and second, protect its interests. The same way we've been doing. So that's the way. And this is why I argued back then, and I still stand by my statement. For the United States and the collective West, they shouldn't be thinking, they shouldn't be thinking that China's going to back down. There is one reason if the thinking persists in the West, because they never expect to see where China is today. Because the mindset in the West still thinking about China of 30, 40 years ago. Because if you go 30 or 40 years ago, China would have not made statement like it did today about backing Iran. That's part of the shift that I need you to grasp. And this is why the West collective didn't expect where China's going to be economically, politically, and diplomatically. That's how I see it. And even I remember, I quote at that time was the Secretary of Treasury, Henry Paulson, who was the head of Sachs, I think, Goldman Sachs, if I'm. So what did he say back then? And I keep the quote for you. It's in the book for those whom I end up buying the book. You guys can read it there, but I'll share it with the community here. He said, and I quote, 40 years ago, most Americans wouldn't have imagined owing China 1 red cent. Now it is the US's biggest creditor, owing just under $1.3 trillion of our government's debt. It is enough to make the head spin, or for Americans to wonder how the world got turned upside down so fast. End of quote. And the answer that we Americans should grasp and accept is that China worked hard enough to be where it is today. We did not. We cannot compete. It's because where our interest lies. China invested in its own domestic projects and so forth. What are we investing on? Truth matters. So, and like I argued back then, which again, I am trying to bring this to you guys to understand. Once again, nothing happens in a vacuum when it comes down to geopolitics. You know, all those pieces are moving together. And I said back then that this approach, that China's long-term strategy focuses more on having a relationship with the United States, more complementary than acrimonious when it comes to the region, meaning Middle East. That's what I argued back then. Just let that sink in for a moment. I'm going to repeat it. I wrote back then that this approach suggests that China's long-term strategy focuses more on having a relationship with the United States, more complementary than acrimonious when it comes to the Middle East. Why is this? You think China's doing it out of fear? No. It's a shrewd movement, because if you look at the Chinese history, will give you the answer. And China did this back then and still doing it today for two main reasons. One is the US attention shifts away from the Pacific region. And two, China secures more economic ventures with key regional players, including Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey to a degree. So, and this is why I asked you the question earlier. Will, for example, the conflict in Gaza will lead to a formal military alliance between Russia, China, and Iran? Because even back then I argued, will the Middle East become a hot zone where the US and China's interests collide? And again, I saw it coming. It's because the world wasn't standing still. The world was moving, and moving in a direction that we couldn't control anymore. That's called shifting from a unipolar to a multipolar order. So, and like that, I asked the question, and I put the answer is possible, meaning the interests will collide. China's support for Iran is a testimony to this, what I argued back then. It's just the way I see it. And even I went as far as saying, as far as China and Iran back then, and I argued this vociferously, backing it with facts and arguments, logical argument one day. I argued back then that China and Iran may enter into a military treaty of some sort, clearing the way for the former, meaning China in this case, to establish a military and naval bases on Iranian soil, similar to the arrangements the United States has with Bahrain, for example. That's where we have our Fifth Fleet, right? However, I argued back then that China does not, I argue that does not strike me as a wise policy for China to embark on at this time, meaning at the time when I was writing this. Rather, China will wait until the dust settles in this latest major shift in regional geopolitics to better assess the situation and execute its next calculated move. And here it is. That's why I'm saying, guys, this is not in a vacuum. This is well-calculated strategy by the Chinese, that the Iranians feel comfortable enough to move forward and announce about the nuclear submarine. So, and let alone the idea of what Russia type of weapons they shipped already to Iran. Because here is the thing, when you think about it, China and Iran's military interests, militarily, you think about it, just militarily, Iran and China, the interest could merge in an unexpected way. We will never know. To me, this is like one of those. Well, who tell me, guys, whoever, and if there's anybody in YouTube, I'll challenge, if the so-called analysts, if there's anybody in YouTube who kind of argued or thought in the idea of, could this interest of China and Russia, China and Iran will merge in an unexpected way? None. Because here's the thing, with China's advanced military technology, right? One assumes, as I argued back then, the lifting of sanctions on Iran will allow China now to sell its military systems to many countries in the region, including Iran, of course. That's what I argue back then. And to me, I'm seeing it folding in front of my eyes here as we speak. Because despite the much anticipated shift, geopolitical shift that is in the region, following this back then, the US-Iran nuclear agreement, I'm convinced that China will proceed cautiously. So as not, you know why? Do you think because they're scared of the US? No. This one is not to upset the balance of the world order. China's strategic about it. A system, because remember, it was through this global order that was for the last 30 or 40 years where China moved forward. Doesn't make any sense to disrupt that one. What it makes sense is to move shrewdly moving forward. Yeah. Because like I argued back then in my book, China strikes me as a pragmatic regime that understands the stakes if it flexes its economic and military muscles beyond what is realistic. And once again, that's what I argued back then, and I'll bring it into today. This is why China stated the way it stated the argument first. Let me just go back to it right here because it will make more sense to you. The quote, Mr. Wani said, China supports Iran in defending its sovereignty, security, and national dignity in accordance with the law and in its effort to maintain regional peace and stability, and stand ready to maintain close communication with Iran. End of quote. This is exactly what I'm arguing here. That's why China will proceed cautiously, and China will not flex its military. Can you just imagine? Just imagine this, guys. China will bring in its advanced naval systems. You all know what it means. So, or maybe even the question for you, should China bring in its advanced naval system to the region? What do you guys think? Yes or no? Should China bring in its advanced naval systems to the region. Excuse me. And by the way, guys, make sure to prepare a question or two. Let me see your answer. Oh, I saw someone here. Oh, Boone, good to see you, Boone. Interesting time we live in. Thanks for this. You are most welcome, Boone, and good to see you. I know I haven't seen you for a while, but I know why. So good to see you, Boone. Let me see your answer, guys. Oh yeah. I don't see the answer. Oh, Dragon 52. Thank you very much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate you, man.
Will definitely retaliate, and it feels obliged to bring about deterrence. We have to remember that the Israeli regime is a rogue regime and has the full support of the West, even when it carries out genocide. And as it carries out this genocide, this Gaza Holocaust, it is being funded, it is being armed, ammunition is being provided on a daily basis, literally. So it shows that the West will support the regime no matter what it does, regardless of what it does. The world has turned against the Israeli regime across the global south. People despise the regime. And the regime right now is waiting for 2 weeks in fear about what Iran is going to do. So the wrath of Iran is very much real.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Has Iran's promise to retaliate against Israel for the killing of Ismail Haniyeh created a dilemma that could be difficult for Tehran to resolve? That's the key issue I shall raise today with Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran and a former advisor to the Iranian nuclear negotiation team, Professor Mohammad Marandi, who joins us from Tehran. Professor Marandi, according to the BBC, a week ago, the Iranian acting foreign minister said your country would respond at the right time and in the appropriate manner to the killing of Ismail Haniyeh. But now with peace talks facilitated by Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, perhaps starting as early as tomorrow, Thursday, and after the British Prime Minister spoke to your president advising restraint, will there be an Iranian retaliation for the killing of Haniyeh? Al Jazeera and today Reuters suggest Tehran could be rethinking. So can you start by telling me, where do things stand?
Iran will definitely retaliate, and it feels obliged to bring about deterrence. We have to remember that the Israeli regime is a rogue regime and has the full support of the West, even when it carries out genocide. And as it carries out this genocide, this Gaza Holocaust, it is being funded, it is being armed, ammunition is being provided on a daily basis, literally. So it shows that the West will support the regime no matter what it does, regardless of what it does. And therefore, Iran has to protect itself. And so do countries of the region, so do people of the region, because the West is obviously going to allow the Israelis to do whatever they want. If you go back to April and recall, after the Israeli regime bombed the Iranian consulate in Damascus and killed 12 people, the Iranians took the case to the UN Security Council. But what happened there? The United States, the French, the British, and the Germans, they all opposed condemning the Israelis, the Israeli regime. So the Israeli regime bombed an Iranian embassy, killing 12 people, and the West refused to allow the UN Security Council to pass a resolution simply condemning this act. The Iranians back then, they launched a direct attack. It was the first direct attack from Iran, and it was in response to this attack against Iranian sovereignty and this act of murder. The Iranian response was very carefully constructed so that the international community will see that the focus will remain on the Israeli regime because of its genocide. And also, Iran wanted to show its international partners, including India, that we're not seeking a regional war which would crush the global economy. The Israeli regime, of course, spent $1.4 billion trying to bring down a bunch of very cheap drones, and the Americans spent over $2.5 billion doing the same. And Iran used a handful of more advanced weapons that got through the defense system and struck their targets. After that, deterrence was established, and Iran felt no need to strike the Israeli regime again. But then, more recently, the regime carried out an assassination attack in Tehran. They struck a building, an official guest house where foreign leaders stay. Indian leaders stay in that building. They murdered a high-ranking Palestinian official, the chief negotiator for the Palestinians, and they insulted the Iranian honor because he was a guest of Iran, and they violated Iranian sovereignty. So the retaliation will definitely be coming, but Iran has many calculations in its response and the timing of its response.
I'll come to the character and nature of the retaliation in a moment's time. But just to confirm, you're saying that reports in organizations like Al Jazeera and Reuters that Iran may be rethinking because it doesn't want to scupper the peace talks that are starting allegedly tomorrow, those reports are inaccurate and untrue. As you said, Iran will definitely retaliate.
Yes, Iran will definitely retaliate. And just so that your viewers would have a better understanding, in general, and this is true for Reuters in particular, but also to almost all Western media outlets, whenever they say that, whenever they give say an unnamed Iranian official, they are usually fabricating, if not always fabricating.
And
Reuters Reuters has absolutely no access to people in the know about what Iran's decisions are at that level.
I take your point, Professor Marandi. If I recall correctly, both those reports, the Al Jazeera report as well as the Reuters report, were sourced to unnamed Iranian officials. Let's then at this point come to the character of the retaliation whenever it happens. President Pezeshkian has made it clear that Iran does not want to broaden the war. It does not want to contribute to a bigger crisis, but at the same time, and I think I'm quoting him now, he said Israel will definitely receive a response for its crimes and its insolence. How can you be certain your response won't broaden the war and contribute to a bigger crisis? How can you be certain the one thing your president says he does not want to do is perhaps the one thing that will happen when you retaliate?
Well, obviously, the point that he makes is that the Iranians, from their part, are being responsible. And we have to keep in mind that the Iranians did not carry out this attack, nor did the Iranians carry out an attack in April. It was on both occasions. On both occasions, it was the Israeli regime. An Iranian response is inevitable and necessary simply because we know that if Iran does not respond, the Israeli regime will do it again. If you think that Iran is not, if Iran, by not responding, Iran will be safe, you're mistaken. Without a doubt, the Israelis will see this as a sign of Iranian weakness, and they will carry out another attack, probably more deadly, in 2, 3 months, 5 months, 1 month, in the near future. Netanyahu does that sort of thing. His people do that sort of thing. The regime does that sort of thing. Remember, I have to always keep in mind myself that the Israeli regime is slaughtering women and children day and night. They are raping men in prison, and no one goes to jail for it. So it is not a big leap from genocide against Palestinians with full Western support to the bombing of Tehran, or the assassination of an Iranian leader, or the murder of a high-ranking Iranian official, or the bombing of an Iranian installation. Therefore, Iran's response will definitely come. But again, the Iranians will carry out their response in a way where the Israeli regime regrets what it does, but it will leave room for the United States to be able to yank hard on the leash of Netanyahu. Have no doubt that if the United States wanted, if the regime in Washington wanted the genocide to end, it would end today.
Let's come back to the character of Iran.
And if the United States wants to prevent the widening of a war, they could do that today. They don't. So far, they have not shown the will, because of those who have great influence in Washington, the Zionist lobby, which is comprised of Christian Zionists, Jewish Zionists.
I take your point, Professor Marandi, but let's focus for a moment specifically on the character of the retaliation that Iran has in mind. Many people believe Iran faces a dilemma. Widening the war and escalating the crisis is exactly what Netanyahu wants. It would also, as you know better than me, goad Washington into joining Israel in an attack on Iran. On the other hand, not retaliating effectively would damage Iran's credibility, and it would also affect the president's internal standing vis-a-vis hardliners within the regime in Tehran. So how does he resolve this dilemma? He has to find the most just response, but that could be fluke, and you can miss a fluke very easily.
Well, I don't consider Iran to be a regime. President Pezeshkian's administration has a responsibility towards the Iranian people. And this is not an issue that divides ordinary Iranians. This is an issue of sovereignty and national security. And Iranians overwhelmingly feel the need to be protected. And they also feel the need for their honor and dignity to be respected. And we saw that when Ismail Haniyeh was murdered by the Israeli regime, that he was on the streets of Tehran. Millions of people participated in his funeral, so he was widely respected in the country.
But you're really confident that you can find the sort of response that would be both serious and severe, and one that Israel will not forget, but at the same time will not exacerbate the situation and widen the conflict and create a bigger problem. You're confident you can actually hit that right note? Because as I said, most people believe it's close to impossible to do.
Well, that again would be the problem that the United States has to resolve. The ball is in their court, as they say. Iran is not responsible for this situation. And Iran must make sure that the regime does not do this again. In April, Iran carried out a strike as an active deterrence, and we saw that that deterrence only lasted 2 or 3 months. So if Iran does not carry out a strong and robust active deterrence, then we will have this happen again, and then the crisis will get larger.
But
if the regime, if
can I interrupt with your
Netanyahu,
permission, Professor? You, in a sense, have made my point for me. The retaliation that you undertook in April, when you possibly fired hundreds of drones and missiles on Israel, did very little damage because most of those were shot down. It didn't stop an Israeli response almost 10, 12 days later, and it didn't stop the killing of Haniyeh. So what does this retaliation achieve? It didn't achieve very much in April. And if you do another retaliation now, it's likely not to achieve very much again. But you run the risk of exacerbating the problem. So if you look at it in cost-benefit terms, it's a huge risk with very little result.
no, I think that your assessment of April is inaccurate. As I pointed out earlier, the Israeli regime spent almost $1.4 billion on bringing down those very inexpensive drones that for Iran costed nothing. And the Americans spent roughly $2.5 billion. In all, about $4 billion were spent by this broad coalition of Western countries to bring down those drones and old missiles. But as I pointed out earlier, the more developed missiles, every single one of them got through the U.S.-led defense shield. The ones that were supposed to go through got through. One hit an air base in the south, the air base that was used to strike the Iranian embassy, but also to bomb Gazan women and children. And the other was targeted, the other base that was targeted was on the Syrian occupied Golan Heights, or on the border of the Syrian Golan. And it also struck its target and caused.
I take your point. A handful of
but actually, just one. Excuse me. Let me finish just one moment. But actually, the point that I'm making reconfirms the notion that despite the effectiveness, and I should add that that strike had another intention as well, not just to draw. It was also to draw this fire, so that Iran could learn about American, Israeli, and other capabilities that were used for future purposes like this.
I take your point, Professor Marandi. A handful of missiles, but only a very small handful did get through and did meet some target. But the real cost, as you said in your answer, was a financial cost. And whether it's 2 billion or 4 billion or 6, that is not a price that either Israel or America consider expensive to pay. They'd be happy to
so basically, although I would disagree, because it was also, as I said, an intelligence gathering operation, and surface-to-air missiles are very expensive and difficult to produce. But you also confirm my point that in order, therefore, to create real permanent deterrence so that the Israeli regime does not dare to strike Iran again, then Iran's response has to be even more robust.
Okay.
And if Iran does not carry out a strike against the Israeli regime, that will be inviting the regime to carry out another attack, because as you say, Netanyahu and his people, they want to expand the war. Therefore, if Iran does not carry out a response, then Netanyahu will carry out another atrocity in order to expand the war. The point is that deterrence is necessary, but the leash is being held by people in the West.
Let's move a point beyond what we are talking about. At the moment, we're actually arguing over whether deterrence, whether it's necessary or not, actually works and whether it's efficacious. You're saying it is. I'm saying it's questionable, or maybe it's not efficacious at all. But let me come to the question of the cost attached to Iran's retaliation if it happens. Because there are other significant concerns that I imagine your president and government will bear in mind. An Iranian retaliation would rule out the possibility of détente with the West and your president's hopes of securing sanctions relief. In your eyes, how much of a concern would that be? It's well known that he'd like to open pathways to the West. It's well known that he'd like to bring the sanctions to an end, or at least have them substantially reduced. But an effective retaliation by Iran would scupper that.
I think anyone who has read President Pezeshkian's open letter that was printed in Tehran Times after he was elected, when he was president-elect, would see that his foreign policy is very similar to the foreign policy of the late President Raisi. His priority will be in developing ties with countries that have remained friendly with Iran during the maximum pressure sanctions. It will be prioritizing expanding cooperation with BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with the Global South in general, Asian integration, expanding ties with neighboring countries, and Iran is willing to engage with the West to move towards rapprochement of some sort under circumstances where the West changes its behavior towards Iran.
Okay.
He is not a naive person, and actually the foreign minister that he has chosen, he has spoken in Parliament, because there's a vote of confidence in the coming days. Dr. Araghchi has spoken in Parliament, basically reaffirming the same. So Iran's
But Dr.
priority
Araghchi is also known to be, if this is the correct description, much more pro-Western than any of our previous foreign ministers. He would be very concerned if an Iranian retaliation against Israel were to undermine or scupper he cherishes of rapprochement and détente.
No, that's a completely inaccurate description of Dr. Araghchi. And Dr. Araghchi is by no means pro-West. I think that is wishful thinking on behalf of certain Western analysts.
Okay.
Dr. Araghchi has been very clear about his position, and he reaffirms the position taken by the president, which, as I said, is almost identical to what Dr.
Did not Dr. Araghchi play a critical, if not leading part, in the nuclear negotiations that led to an agreement with the Obama regime? And that's something you would know because you were advisor to that team at the time. That is why people believe that
that does not. So based on your logic, since I was, as you know, affiliated to the nuclear negotiating team at that time in 2015, that would make me therefore pro-Western as well. No, that does not make him, just because he carried out negotiations, that does not make him pro anything or anti anything. That makes him a negotiator. His views have been expressed clearly in Parliament and elsewhere, and there is a general skepticism in Iran towards the West because the West has violated its agreements with Iran at every opportunity. And the nuclear deal is a major example, but it's not the only example.
Let me
continue. Excuse me. When the United States needed help from Iran to free its hostages in Lebanon, this was before Hezbollah came into existence. The Iranians aided the Americans and helped get them free, and at a significant political cost. And because different groups were holding these Americans, and the Americans made promises to Iran. they violated every single one. They ignored them all. When the Iranians cooperated over those who killed people in New York during 9/11, immediately in return, the Americans called Iran an axis of evil. In the 1990s, when
we're going back into history, Dr.
well, that is all
Rango.
of that is all of that is relevant to the
But the
Iranian
world has changed
American
significantly
relationship.
since then. It's a different
Sorry?
world today. The world
No,
is
it isn't a different world. American mentality, the mentality of the political establishment of the United States has not changed. The most recent example is actually the nuclear deal. The United States, the day that it signed the nuclear deal, it began violating it.
Let me
and
put it
that,
like this. Let me put
and
it
it excuse me, and it refrained from implementing the nuclear deal. And
but
ultimately,
we're not
then
talking about the nuclear deal. We're talking about the cost of retaliation against Israel.
No, but we are also speaking most importantly about the credibility and the trustworthiness of the United States. Because
let's not get deflected. Let's not get deflected.
no,
Let's come back to the core issue.
no, I think if your viewers want to have a real understanding of the situation, there's no escape from the fact that the United States betrayed Iran at every turn, and therefore our political establishment, including senior officials in the foreign ministry, are under no illusions about what the United States would do. And they are under no illusions that Europe will not stray from the United States regardless of what it does. So
because
there is
I accept your point, because I accept the point you're making, let me ask you a follow-up question to the argument you just presented. Downing Street has confirmed that on Monday, the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, spoke to President Pezeshkian and urged Iran to refrain from an attack on Israel. In the days preceding and succeeding the conversation with Starmer, the French president, the German chancellor, and indeed the Biden administration have all appealed in one way or another to Iran not to carry out a retaliatory strike. How much weight does the new government, how much weight does the new president place on such appeals from the West?
I think I responded to that before. I think the problem is in the very fact that none of these leaders have condemned the Israeli regime for bombing embassies. None of them have, of course, complained about the genocide, which is extraordinary. This is not Nazi Germany. This is the 21st century. But also none of them have said anything or condemned Israelis or sanctioned Israelis for the strike on Iran, on Tehran. So I think all of these contacts with Iran reconfirm, in a sense, the fact that they are fully on side with the Israeli regime. Imagine India with a neighbor that can do whatever it wants to India. It can strike India whenever it wants. It can bomb India. It can assassinate. It can do anything that it wants, and it can slaughter people in the country at will, in its own in the land that it occupies at will. And the Americans or whoever, the Chinese, the Iranians, the Russians, call on India not to respond. Whereas you're being bombed, whereas your embassies are being attacked, is India going to remain silent? No country that has a sense of self-respect and self-worth and that respects and whose people expect a certain amount of respect
Well, in all fairness,
would allow that to pass.
Well, in all fairness, in 2008, when over 160 Indian and foreign tourists and civilians were killed in Bombay by terrorists who'd come across the border from Pakistan, India did not retaliate. India chose instead to handle the matter politically. So just to respond to that specific point you're making, not every act of terror necessarily requires kinetic retaliation. But let me put...
I think there is a very sharp difference between the two. One is that India has attacked its neighboring countries on different occasions. Second, that attack was not endorsed openly and officially by a foreign state. Pakistan, on the one hand, has huge problems on its own borders and in its own territory, as you and I both know. And of course, this is something that we have to thank the Americans for, with the creation of Al Qaeda, which ultimately led to the creation of ISIS, and the destabilization of Pakistan and Afghanistan, thanks to the Americans. But what the Israelis did is that they used F-35s to bomb the Iranian embassy in April, and
I'm
the
talking about the
Israelis
killing of Haniyeh, which Israel has
and the
not
Israelis.
accepted or acknowledged as being done by them.
No, the Israelis, in fact, immediately afterwards, a senior official or the Israelis indirectly pointed out that that was their strike. It is acknowledged that it was the Israelis, and the Iranian intelligence knows that the Israelis
Let me put another concern to you.
a very advanced missile to strike that building from the hills above Tehran.
Let me put another concern to you, which could be a second cost if Iran were to go ahead with serious, severe retaliation. It would completely scupper prospects of a Hamas-Israel peace, and more importantly, to the freeing of Palestinian prisoners. And the Palestinian people, not Hamas, but the Palestinian people, are aching for their prisoners in Israeli jails to be released. You referred to how male Palestinian prisoners are being raped. Clearly, the Palestinians want their people back. They want that release. But were Iran to retaliate seriously and severely, that would never happen also, or it would be postponed indefinitely. Is that a cost you're prepared to pay?
I think there's a paradox here, that on the one hand, you're saying that the Israeli regime, you're acknowledging that the Israeli regime is a brutal and barbaric regime that rapes and murders, and therefore, in order to stop the rape and murder, you must allow the regime to get away with other crimes. And also, you're saying that as you said earlier, that Netanyahu wants to expand the war. So based on that assumption that Netanyahu wants to expand the war, then he has no intention of stopping attacks on Iran, and B, he has no intention of stopping the Holocaust in Gaza. Netanyahu, for the last 10 months, has been continuing this Holocaust, despite the fact that there was an agreement put forward by the Americans, and the Americans claimed that Netanyahu supported it. But we've seen this catastrophe, this outrage going on for 10 months without any respite. So I don't think it's at all there's any link at all between Iranian silence and a lack of response and suddenly Netanyahu accepting a ceasefire. You know as well as I that if this war comes to an end, Netanyahu's government will fall, and Netanyahu will go to jail for corruption charges that he's been trying to escape for many years.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors.
First of all, the United States has publicly said they believe Iran's retaliation will perhaps happen this week itself. And to prepare for it, they've sent the USS Georgia, a guided missile submarine, as well as the USS Abraham Lincoln, an aircraft carrier, into the Middle East. Two quick questions about that. Do you believe a retaliation is likely this week itself? And how does your government view the sending of American ships, submarines, and aircraft carriers?
Well, I think one of the very smart things that the Iranians have done is that they've kept they've kept their cards very close, and no one knows when they're going to strike. And they've been carrying out 2 weeks of psychological warfare against the Israeli regime and causing huge damage to the Israeli economy already. The Iranians expected the Americans to mobilize to help the Israelis because the Americans are fully supportive of the Holocaust in Gaza. We have no expectations. But when Iran strikes, I'm sure that the Americans will do what they can to protect the Israelis. But of course, when the Israelis bomb Gaza, the Americans will do nothing to protect the Palestinians. In fact, they will arm the Israelis to do more of the same.
Finally, did the Haniyeh killing embarrass Iran? This is a very different question to any of the ones I've asked you earlier. Did the killing of Haniyeh in an official government state guest house, where official heads of government are put up by the Iranian government, bang in the center of the capital, embarrass Iran, both because it exposed weaknesses in its security and also because it exposed Iran's inability, or maybe I should say failure, to protect an honored guest?
I think if we recall, just a couple of weeks before this assassination, Trump was almost killed in the United States. Now, whether it was a lone shooter or what probably was a network of people who wanted to kill the U.S. Uh, presidential candidate and former president, that's beyond the issue. The point is that these people had no foreign support. The Israeli regime, in carrying out any attack in Iran, uses extensive networks of intelligence that the Americans provide to them. The Five Eyes, US intelligence agencies, and unfortunately, even Western embassies in Tehran. So there is and also in neighboring countries as well. The United States uses neighboring countries to gather intelligence on Iran. So basically, the Israelis have a huge amount of support. Otherwise, this is a very feeble and vulnerable regime. We're seeing it today in Gaza.
But you're not answering my question.
I told you it is an intelligence failure, but it is not something extraordinary. The United States has had something far worse. The president.
Isn't it more than an intelligence failure? Isn't it an embarrassing outcome when an honored guest in a government guest house, bang in the center of the capital, where you put up other heads of government when they come visiting, is killed?
No, I think what is embarrassing and what is shameful is for anyone to accept that a regime like Israel, the Israeli regime, would actually carry out such an outrage and attack a building where Indian government officials frequent and murder people inside that building. No one expects a so-called state or a foreign regime to carry out such an operation. But of course, Iran is fighting a war with a coalition of intelligence organizations, and Iran has been on its own in the past, but the tide is turning. The world has turned against the Israeli regime. Across the global south, people despise the regime, and the regime right now is waiting for 2 weeks in fear about what Iran is going to do. So the wrath of Iran is very much real, and the only one who should be ashamed are those people in Washington who support this rogue regime that carries out such atrocities.
Professor Marandi, thank you very much for the time you've given me. Thank you for your fulsome, comprehensive answers. I'm extremely grateful. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Cool figure. Follow me.